Hey, we're just trying to get it. We're trying to get on air here, but we're on phone with tech support.
Okay.
Just to give you a heads up.
So Maurice and Pam, we may be delayed going on the cable channel.
Okay.
We are working on that.
Okay. We will be short Karen tonight and Jess for the start of the meeting. Karen's not feeling well. And Jess is driving back from a work assignment, but she hopes to join us for the later part of the meeting.
I had emailed Jess Brandis.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Susanna, Nancy, I'm going to allow you to speak for just a moment. Can you tell me which item it is that you're speaking on?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, great. I'd like to speak on the item related to Franklin Street, to the town owners, Franklin Street. It might be a consent agenda item, but I'm not positive.
Is it the petition or is it the 150 East Rosemary building?
It's the petition.
The petition will be in the first part of the meeting because they're bringing it back. I put it in last time, but it's coming back again with the downtown partnership.
Okay, well, I just would like to, the CDC discussed it last night and I thought I would bring, and wants to express support for it. But I think that
Thank you. Well, Matt
Are you
Gladdick will speak
speaking-
on it.
Are you be speaking on behalf of the CDC or are you speaking personally, Susanna?
on behalf of the CDC.
Okay,
Thank you.
that influences how much time you get.
Well, I'm not going to take much time.
Okay.
Are we
I'm
ready to
going
go?
to mute. And yes, you're ready to go.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone to the October 27th meeting of the Chapel Hill Town Council. We're glad to have you with us, however you are attending, whether it's with us virtually or you're watching it on the cable channel or you're watching it later at some point in time. We're glad to have you with us. We do appreciate public comment and we have a couple of ways to do that. We'll go into that a little bit more later, but again, we're glad you're here. Tonight, we're going to start off with two ordinance changes, one related to time extension for development projects, the other relating to short-term rentals in the Blue Hill District. And then we will have an item on the historic district review criteria and a proposed office and wet lab project at 150 East Rosemary. We are going to be bumping the affordable housing funds item, which is item number, make sure I get the right number here, 17. To the November 10th agenda. So just making sure that people aren't waiting for that and have heard that. So that's good. And then we have a concept plan at the end of the meeting for 710 North Estes Drive. So, okay. We're going to do our official roll call. As I said, I got a note from Karen Stegman, who's not feeling well this evening, and we knew that Jeff Anderson was driving back from a work assignment and may join us later. But in keeping with the state laws on virtual meetings, we need to have a roll call. So Mayor Pro Tem Michael Parker.
Here.
Council Member Boyncey.
Here.
Council Member Gu.
Here.
Council Member Nguyen.
Here.
Are you back in the state with us or are you still in Austin?
Oh, yes, I'm back now.
Okay, Councilmember Ryan?
Here.
And the mayor is also here. Thank you. All right. First up, we have a celebrating successes video. I actually got to see this earlier. I was very excited, and we're very happy as part of our climate action plan. We're a more environmentally sustainable Chapel Hill. We're working to create a network of electric vehicle charging stations. And tonight's celebrating success video focuses on the work we are doing and the progress we're making. Ran, will you please run the video for us?
It is getting easier to go electric in Chapel Hill with new infrastructure coming online all the time. In early October, 2 new electric vehicle or EV charging stations were installed right here at Town Hall.
These stations, which include public charging and charging for employees, can support up to 4 vehicles at once and were made possible by the VW settlement grant from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. And it was great to get Chapel Hill Transit's help to test them.
We added 16 new Nissan Leaf vehicles to the fleet in May, which will complement the electric buses we have recently purchased as we move forward with piloting electric vehicles. These cars transport bus operators from the transit facility to their bus for each shift, as well as staff commuting between town facilities for meetings.
At the town of Chapel Hill, we're working on ways to do our part to help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that worsen climate change.
The town has more charging stations located in the public level of 140 West Parking Garage and at the Homestead Aquatic Center, with many more planned for installation over the next year.
For example, a big project that is currently underway is the Rosemary parking deck, which will be online in 2022. This deck will initially be built with up to 20 EV charging stations and the infrastructure to quickly and easily add up to 20 more in the near future.
The town has also received a grant from the Orange County Community Climate Action Grant Program to install charging station technology at Eubanks Park and Ride Lot. We've also applied to host several additional public charging stations at other town facilities through Duke Energy's electric vehicle pilot program. You can check out plugshare.com or the PlugShare app to see the available charging stations located throughout Chapel Hill.
This is wonderful progress, and a big thank you to our own John Richardson and Brian Litchfield and all the members of our town staff who've been working hard to bring these projects forward. And having a robust EV charging station network is critical as we green our fleet and support residents and visitors who are going green as well coming into our community. So thank you for that. Okay, I have a few announcements here. Festival on Saturday evening, the town will be hosting one more Twilight Festival Arts Market. The event will take place from 4 to 8 p.m. in the West Franklin parking lot next to Lantern Restaurant. There'll be arts, crafts, food, music, and more. We hope everyone will come out and join in the fun. Oh, and the Tree of the Year contest. I've been asked to do this again because it was so much fun last time. And so we're going to be doing a Tree of the Year contest in mid-November. The town council, Town of Chapel Hill will celebrate our Arbor Day, which we do in November, to raise awareness that November is an optimal time for planting trees in Chapel Hill. As part of this effort, the Town Community Tree Committee will be hosting the 2nd annual Mayor's Tree of the Year contest. We had a lot of fun reading those letters last time. Just one of the many educational activities aimed at raising awareness of tree planting. Participation is easy as submitting a photo and description of your favorite tree. The contest will run through November 20th. Further information will be available through our e-news and social media channels. I also heard from the Friends of Parks and Rec that they are releasing some grant monies to help plant more trees during the month of November as well. So we're very excited. The Green Track Community Open House. It's been a long time coming. COVID delayed us having it last year, and then we had scheduled it for September, but because of the rise of the variant, we delayed it, and it will be coming November 7th from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Arena Center in person with your mask on, or you can also view it virtually on Monday. I don't have the time here. I'm sorry. We'll have to make sure people check the town calendar, and you can look on the calendars of Scarborough, Orange County, and Chapel Hill. The virtual meeting is open to everyone in the entire Orange County. And so is the in-person meeting. So either Sunday or Monday, please participate. We'd like to have your comments. Early voting is running through Saturday, October 30th, and Election Day is next Tuesday, November 2nd. In addition to the town offices, voters are electing 3 school board members as well. So please come out and vote. All right, the Council Committee on Economic Sustainability meets on Friday, November 5th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. The agenda includes updates on the housing study and Porthole Alley. The meeting will be virtual and members of the public are encouraged to attend. All right. And tonight, I just want to remind council members in your packets, you had a letter from the Downtown Partnership and one from me as part of our petition. And we'll talk about that during the petition process. And then I want to announce I've been collaborating with the Orange leaders and talking to all of you. We are going to remain virtual through the end of November at this point. We'll make a decision, but we are hopeful we're coming back together in person in December. So thank you all for replying. It was overwhelmingly that's what you would prefer to do because we haven't been able to figure out how to run a hybrid system at this point in time. So now it is time. And oh, does anyone else have announcements to make? Mr. Wynn.
Hello, if anyone is planning on eating dinner tomorrow evening, please consider joining us at Med Deli for a spirit night in support of our local YMCA. A portion of all proceeds from 5 to 7:30 will go to support our annual campaign at the Chapel Hill Carborough branch of the YMCA. Just let them know you're with the Y when you order, and they'll donate those funds to support us.
I think there's also an ice cream social at Rivers Agency supporting the same cause tomorrow afternoon. So you can have your ice cream before your dinner. That will work out well. So
5 to 7:30, come join us.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. All right. As we said, we appreciate public input. It's important to us as we help make decisions for our community. We will, if you're wishing to speak, you could have registered ahead of time, but you can still actually use the raise your hand function if you're joining us virtually or the *9 on your phone. Mr. Parker will call you in 2 at a time, and we ask you to keep your comments limited to 3 minutes, please. And we welcome you to speak on any of the items that are open for speaking on. And we always start off with public comment and petitions on things that are not already on the agenda. I know tonight we have several petitions, so let's start with those, and then we will open up for regular public comment. So the first petition is John Shear's request to amend the April 14th, 2021 columbarium request. Welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Thank you.
All right. Well, Madam Mayor, council members, staff, and any interested parties, my name is John Shearer. I'm a longtime citizen of Chapel Hill since 1948, and I come to you with regard to a packet of information that I sent out to everyone with regard to the development and installation of a 160 niche columbarium in the old Chapel Hill Cemetery. This packet I request to be forwarded and to be referred on to the staff, and I would also request that I would be allowed to assist and aid in any way that they would deem appropriate with regard to making sure that the historical integrity of the old Chapel Hill Cemetery is protected while serving the community with this facility open to all people. My goal is to respect the past and serve the future. There's a short list of action items that perhaps the staff would be interested in taking a look at. One is the flag and find and flag the corners of plots T7, T14. That would be helpful. Then to liaison with UNC to see if we can establish an agreement that would allow me to pay for and to install a footbridge across from the Memorial Grove to the columbarium, thus giving public access without stepping on any graves and so forth. It would be handicap accessible as well. Number 3, there is a tree at the southern end of the right-of-way adjacent to the plots 7 and 14, T7 and T14. I've included photographs and and a map in the packet, and they're available for you to take a look at. I would ask that the town arborist perhaps be consulted and see if he would be agreeable to having that tree removed, because I have witnessed myself grave digging equipment trying to make access into the cemetery and having a devil of a time keeping out of other grave areas. And this tree has been a problem in that way. And then finally, my folks, Edna and Andy Shearer, now gone, but wonderfully remembered, did a lot for this town. And I understand we have 30 seconds, so thanks very much. And I've done, my community service has been in the theater and in music, and basically I am now will be in the 26th year of my role as a Ghost of Christmas Present in Ira David Wood's Christmas Carol. We're going up December the 9th in Raleigh, and then in Durham at DPAC, I think on the 14th, a week later. Please come see us. And I want to end this with the last lines, and that is, I tell Scrooge, the secret lies deep in your own heart, Ebenezer. It's been there all the time. The thing is to try to do as much as you can in the time that you have on this earth to make a difference. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time, and let's make a difference.
Thank you, Mr. Shearer. Our normal practice is to receive and refer petitions to the mayor and manager. I'm going to ask the council to wait, and then we can do them all together before a roll call vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next petition is Joe Patterson, request to ban through traffic by trucks and buses on Henderson Street and North Street. Welcome.
Okay. I trust I'm visible and everything. Okay.
We can hear you and see you just fine.
Thanks very much. It's I will be quick about this. The petition we submitted is pretty straightforward and pretty short. We have strong support from all of the members of the neighborhood to try to control traffic on North Street and Henderson Street. We live most of us live at the end of Cobb Terrace, or at the end of North Street and Henderson Street on Cobb Terrace, and we are only accessible. We only have access for protection of our neighborhood through those two streets. We're dead end basically, and anything that blocks those roads or prevents emergency vehicles from getting to us in a timely way is a threat to our well-being. And we have noticed a substantial increase in problem traffic, which would pose that kind of hindrance recently, and we expect it to get worse in the future. Basically, the easiest thing for me to tell you to do is to just, if you will please, simply get in your car, drive down North Street, drive down Henderson Street, and imagine running head to head with either a shuttle bus or a large truck coming the opposite direction. And then imagine you're a fire engine trying to get past that vehicle to get to our houses. That will make it simply very clear to you what the problem is and why we need protection from these vehicles now and in the future. In addition, the ongoing construction project, which is going to be blocking access to Rosemary Street for the next month or so, is going to be causing problems for the next year as well. We basically have all our neighborhood streets around us are already blocked to trucks in some form or another. We are the only neighborhood street for the historic district on this side of town that does not have protection from vehicles of this type. And since we are abused, I guess, more than anything else, since it's an easy cut through for people trying to get from Rosemary Street to MLK, we would simply like the same protections that everybody else has got. And we are going to be having much, much worse problems in the future. The luxury apartment complexes to the north of us are using, they're running their shuttle buses through the area. Okay, I see that. Finally, we need some quick action. It needs to, the only way to control it and for us to enforce it is to have a law in place that will allow the police to do something. The staff is not set up, nor are they available to enforce action when people from either the construction project or other people avoiding construction project go through our neighborhood. So we'd be grateful if you would look at this very, very quickly and give us the same protection as all of our neighbors have. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Okay, next up is the Chapel Hill Downtown Partnerships request and your mayor's request that the town explore taking over the downtown portion of Franklin Street. I gave you a heads up last week, and the Downtown Partnership has prepared to speak here. I think we have Matt Gladdick, and then we'll welcome Susanna Dancy from our CDC to speak as well. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I want to thank the council again for investing in downtown in the expanded sidewalks. What we've learned during this year-long, over a year now, experiment is just how valuable these expanded sidewalks are. Many businesses would not still be here were it not for those expanded sidewalks. And a number of businesses have had a record summer where normally we have doldrums as students leave, in part because our residents have come out to eat and dine in beautiful spaces. We're very grateful for that. We want to make sure that as the pandemic drags on and as our downtown is finally having a resurgence, that we don't lose these outdoor dining spaces, and that we make sure that we're able to provide adequate ADA accessible spaces for people in our community that need it. We're very grateful for the work you've done on this. We hope that you'll continue to look into the cost of this, as this has become the #1 request from our businesses as well as community members. We'll be following up with more signed petitions to show you just how deep and wide that support is in our community. Again, we're very grateful for all you've invested to bring us to this point, and we think the experiment has been incredibly successful. So thank you again for your trust and investment in our downtown.
Thank you. Ms. Dancy. Welcome. Oh, you're
Okay,
driving?
I'm sorry.
Ooh.
Thank you.
Keep your
I'm
eyes on
not.
the road.
I'm parked.
Okay.
I am parked.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm here on behalf of the Community Design Commission. At our meeting last night, we discussed the the joint petitions you're discussing right now on our agenda, or we added it to our agenda so we could discuss it and vote on it. And we had a unanimous vote to support the petitions, that the sentiments of the petitions, and to move forward with exploring town ownership of Franklin Street downtown. The CDC has petitioned council, in fact, in the past about doing a design district, or in order to help create a more vibrant downtown design. So we really think that this is a great initiative, and we want to offer our full support for this exploration, and we hope that it's successful, so that downtown and Franklin Street are able to build on the vibrancy that we saw with the sidewalk dining this summer. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more petitions from the public? Because I'll speak on this one too. We've had starting conversations with NCDOT. They are amenable to us taking over the street. That would give us the flexibility to stripe it and use it the way we would like to do that. And they're not requiring us to take over all of Franklin Street. The proposal is from Henderson to Merritt Mill. And that way we can design our downtown for pedestrian and bike implementations, and we can rearrange things the way we'd like to have, with maybe planters in the middle of the crosswalks, added safety, those kinds of things, bumping out the corners so that pedestrians have less space they have to cross over. It would just give us a lot more flexibility. But we do need to determine the costs that would be associated with this, because we would be in charge of repaving and those kinds of things at some future date. That was just repaved not too long ago, so hopefully that's not too far out in the future. Anyway, it's our custom to receive and refer to the manager and mayor?
I move we receive.
So moved.
I have three of you. We'll go with Mr. Bonds, Mr. Boyncy making the motion, Mr. Parker seconding it, and roll call vote. Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy,
Aye.
Ms. Gu,
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen, Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
The mayor says aye as well. Thank you all. Now, are there comments from the public on items that are not on our agenda tonight?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. Well, then that brings us to the consent agenda, council. How say you?
I move the consent agenda.
Second.
A move by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Boyncy. I do want to bring up in here that when moving forward on the consent agenda, we are adding an additional 100,000 to the performance agreement for our human services grants that we give out in partnership with our nonprofits that do amazing work in our community. All right, we will need a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy?
Aye.
Ms. Gu?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, you have the upcoming public hearings items from the petition status list in your packet. So that brings us to the first discussion item, item number 13. Close the legislative hearing and consider a land use management ordinance text amendment. Hang on. Sections 4.4 zoning amendments, 4.5 special use permits, 4.7 site plan reviews, and 4.8 master land use plans related to the time extension periods granted by the town manager. Ms. Jones.
And good evening. And I believe you can see that properly now.
Yes, we can.
I'm Judy Johnson with our planning department, and I'm not going to rattle through all of what the mayor just so eloquently got through.
And then I called you Ms. Jones, sorry.
You got through the title. That's most of it.
I apologize.
So this evening, we are looking to close the legislative hearing and receive any additional comments from the council or the public, looking for adoption of Resolution 11 and enactment of Ordinance 7. As we have been through this process, or this project has been through our planning commission back, I believe it was earlier this month, or actually it was in September, and then we had the legislative hearing in the end of September and back this evening for potential action. So as the mayor said, there are several sections of our ordinance. It's all within Article 4, and this has strictly to do with time extensions that the town manager is able to grant through our current land use management ordinance. So the top there, you can see the current language is the town manager may grant a single extension, and these are all 12-month extensions for conditional zoning, special use permits, site plans, or master land use plans. So once council entitles a project, it has typically 2 years to begin and 3 years to finish. And the manager has the ability to grant a single extension of a 12-month period. So the proposal before you tonight is to allow the town manager to grant an additional 12-month extension to that. So the manager would could grant two single extensions of 12 months. And each of these extensions would be subject to review of paramount conditions of health, safety, and welfare, those sorts of things. So just giving the manager an additional, basically, year for an extension. That is my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. You can bring us back to full screen. There we go. Council members, any questions? All right, anybody from the public wishing to speak on this item? All right, back to council then, please.
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Nguyen. Was that you? Okay. All right, any comments that haven't been shared? Any comments? All right, roll call, Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy.
Aye.
Ms. Gu.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well.
I move Resolution 11.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Parker and second by Mr. Boyncy. Roll call vote. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy?
Aye.
Ms. Goo?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
And the mayor also says aye. All right. We're done with that.
And I move ordinance
Oh.
7.
Oh, sorry. Now there's always another piece in there. Is there a second? Okay, so moved by Mr. Parker and second by Mr. Boyncy. Roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy?
Aye.
Ms. Goo?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen? Ms.
Aye.
Ryan? Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Thank you. All right. Good work. That brings us to item number 14 on the agenda. Close the legislative hearing and consider enacting a land use management ordinance text amendment, section 3.11, regarding short-term rental standards in the Blue Hill District. Hello, Mrs. McDonald.
Yes. Good evening. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Let me share my screen. All right, everyone can see that?
We can see it.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Becky McDonald in our Planning Department. Tonight we have a land use management ordinance text amendment for section 3.11, the Blue Hill Form District. I have 6 slides. I'll take less than 5 minutes. Our recommendation tonight is to close the legislative hearing, adopt the resolution of consistency, and enact Ordinance A. We're at the final step in the process here. We've gone through staff review, planning commission review, and the legislative hearing was opened last month in September, and potential action scheduled for this evening. I just wanted to remind everyone, so the previous text amendment, there was one that was passed earlier this spring for the same section that updated the permitted use table to include primary and dedicated short-term rentals. It also clarified that short-term rentals do not count towards non-residential components requirement in mixed-use buildings. And so the interest for this text amendment was to apply the town-wide operational standards, which were also adopted last spring, for short-term rentals to the Blue Hill District as well, and also distinguish short-term rentals from overnight lodging. So the first part of the text amendment applies the same operational standards that are currently town-wide for short-term rentals to the Blue Hill Form District. So putting that on the same footing as the rest of the zoning districts in town. And then the second part of the proposed amendment distinguishes short-term rentals from overnight lodging by establishing some criteria for hotels and other types of establishments that are separate from short-term rentals. So they have to have on-site staff, separate access points, and be the primary use in a building with residences. Otherwise, they would then be classified as short-term rentals and would have to be subject to those requirements. So that's what I have. Again, our recommendation is to close the legislative hearing and adopt the resolution of consistency and enact Ordinance A. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Council members, any questions? Anyone from the anyone from the public wishing to comment on this evening?
There is no one. There ain't anybody.
There ain't anybody. Okay, thank you. All right. Sorry, a little punchy nut, aren't we? So I bring it back to council.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
The move by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Boyncy to close the public hearing. Roll call vote. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy?
Aye.
Ms. Goo?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen? Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. That's unanimous.
I move the resolution of consistency.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Nguyen to move for the resolution of consistency. Roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy?
Aye.
Ms. Goo?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well.
And I move Ordinance A.
Second.
The move by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Boyncy to move Ordinance A. Roll call vote. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy?
Aye.
Ms. Goo?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to item 15 on the agenda. Open the legislative hearing, Land Use Management Ordinance Text Amendment, Section 3.6.2E, related to the Historic District Commission review criteria. We have Ms. Graham with us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Anya Gunn with the Planning Department. I have 7 slides, and this presentation should take about 2 minutes. The recommendation before you tonight is to open the legislative hearing, receive comments, and then continue the hearing to November 17th. And then you would be enacting the ordinance at that meeting. Here's where we are in the process. Both the Historic District Commission as well as the Planning Commission have reviewed the proposed text amendments related to the Historic District Commission's review. Staff had committed to the Council and the Historic District Commission that following the adoption of the design standards last March, that we would be revising the congruity standards that were outlined in A through J of the Land Use Management Ordinance. And in April, the Town Council approved some text amendments at that time that removed A through J. We also made additional updates that addressed changes to the North Carolina General Statutes 160D. And we went through the land use management ordinance at that time and replaced any reference to the design guidelines with the design principles and standards. On making these changes, we inadvertently removed the language referencing the congruity standard that's required by the state statutes. And so tonight's text amendment is just adding that congruity standard back in. So here's what is being proposed. We are removing the reference to the design standards and instead saying that the Historic District Commission needs to make findings whether an application is incongruous with the special character of the historic district. This actually doesn't have any impact on how the Historic District Commission is conducting their review. They've been doing it the same way all along, where they apply the design standards to ensure that any changes that are occurring in the historic districts are compatible with the character of those districts. And so again, the recommendation before you tonight is to open the legislative hearing, receive comments, and continue the hearing to November 17th, and then enact the ordinance at that time. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Are there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
Nope.
Okay, bring it back to the council then.
I move we recess the legislative hearing to November 17th.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Boyncy to recess the legislative hearing to November 17th. Any comments? Then a roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy?
Aye.
Ms. Gu? Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to item number 16, open the legislative hearing application for conditional zoning at 150 East Rosemary Street. I think this one will take a little longer than the other.
It might. I will get my presentation ready. All right, good evening again, everyone. I'm Becky McDonald with our planning department. And tonight we have a conditional zoning application for 150 East Rosemary Street. I have 11 slides. I might take more than 2 to 3 minutes for this one, but it shouldn't be too long. So our recommendation tonight is to open the legislative hearing and receive comments and then continue the hearing to the November 17th meeting. Here's where we are in the process. So we've gone through staff and advisory board review. We're opening the legislative hearing tonight and potential action is scheduled for the November 17th meeting. So just to give everyone an overview of the project. So it's located on the corner of East Rosemary Street and Henderson Street. Franklin Street is the road on to the south of the red box here, which is outlining the 1.5 acre site. It is a conditional zoning application. So it's currently zoned Town Center 2 and the proposal is for Town Center 3 conditional zoning. It's the location of the existing Wallace deck. And the proposal is to demolish the Wallace deck and construct a 7-story lab and office building over 3 levels of underground parking. I also wanted to bring council's attention to the revised transportation impact analysis that has been submitted. It's in your packet. You've seen the full transportation impact analysis for the larger East Rosemary redevelopment project, but there has been some updates that have been submitted as of last week. So that revision is in your packet. This is a photo of the existing Wallace deck that will be replaced. There are about 309 parking spaces in the Wallace deck today. This is an overview of the site plan. I'm not going to go into too much detail because the applicant team does a great job of explaining all the intricate details of the proposal, but just to give you an overview. So the main building will be in this gray block. It's 7 stories above 3 levels of parking. The town green is proposed to be located on the right side of your screen. There will be access off of East Rosemary Street and into the deck. And there will also be maintaining the NCNB alleyway behind the deck here with access out onto Henderson Street on the right side of your screen here. There will be about 170 parking spaces in those 3 levels of parking, with 150 bike parking spaces inside the deck and then another 30 or so bike parking spaces outside. And then there's also the solid waste will be located over here off of Henderson Street, and the streetscape will also be updated, the sidewalk along here to match the rest of East Rosemary. There is a proposed modification to regulations. The maximum primary height is 44 feet in the Town Center 3 zoning district, and the request is to increase that to 112 feet. Maximum secondary height or core height is 120 feet and requesting to increase that to 140. So this block shows what the by right building envelope would be with 44 feet here, going up to 120 feet here. This shows what the proposed building envelope would be with the increased both primary and secondary height. So this is the section of the building that would be exceeding the by right building envelope. And I just wanted to show a couple other buildings around town and heights to compare. So here we have 140 West, which is about 105 feet at the core height. Shortbread Lofts is up to 95 feet. The CVS building, which is right next to this, is 95 feet. Easttown Medical Office Building is 90 feet, and Greenbridge is 135 feet at the core heights. Finally, I just wanted to go through the advisory boards and their recommendations. All of the advisory boards that this project has been reviewed by have recommended approval of the project with conditions. The Planning Commission had several recommendations regarding facade treatments and public art, the LEED certification level. They had some recommendations regarding activation on the street level at the first floor, and some considerations for electric bikes and electric vehicles and other bike infrastructure and parking needs, and also recommended additional shade trees. The Community Design Commission asked to rethink the solid waste location and would like the mechanical equipment to be subject to review and approval by the CDC. The Environmental Stewardship Advisory Board recommended to use biofuel instead of natural gas, wanted to incorporate plans for fresh air and ventilation and use rainwater capture for non-potable water needs. The Transportation and Connectivity Advisory Board had some recommendations regarding bike parking and electric vehicle parking as well, and asked for better delineation of the crosswalk behind the post office for the post office alley. And finally, the Historic District Commission, they've also provided a letter to the council, which is in your packet with the rest of the advisory board recommendations. And among some other comments, they also asked for public art on the solid waste enclosure gates and to use town standards for the streetlights. So again, our recommendation tonight is to open the public hearing and receive comments, and then continue the hearing to the November 17th meeting. And the applicant is also here with a presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this point, or we can wait until they're done.
Let's wait until after they've made their presentation, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Joe Dyer, Grove Properties. With me is Whitney St. Charles on the Grove team and Michael Stevenson. And in the interest of brevity, I'll hand it directly to Michael to go through a presentation overview of the building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. It's good to see all of you again. Are you seeing the screen?
We're seeing a conglomerate of your
Yes, indeed. Okay, clean it up here.
There you go.
Yep. Okay, so of course, you're all aware that this is the third piece of a larger redevelopment with the renovation of the 137 East Franklin, 136 East Rosemary, the new town deck, which is not just a deck, I understand, and then the new lab and office building, and equally important, the new public space on the corner, the new park space has been tentatively called the Town Green. And we're very interested in the connections this is creating, the proximity to the UNC campus, and then the connections between Franklin Street and Rosemary Street. And we think that some of the things we're doing in the creation of this new space are going to greatly enhance that, as well as the overall streetscape improvements that are being made. So just a quick summary of some of the basic facts and figures. The building is going to provide about 238,000 square feet of office and research space, the new park, 158 car parks, 150 indoor parking spaces, improve pedestrian connections, widen sidewalks on Rosemary and Henderson, with new streetscape and trees that are going to match the new streetscape on the other parts of East Rosemary. And we're really cleaning up the frontage on the south side of Rosemary Street. We're going from 4 curb cuts to 1. So we think that's going to really improve the pedestrian environment in front of the building. The site is, as you know, where the current Wallace deck is. The eastern part is in the historic district. We had been before the HTC multiple times and received their comments regarding that. So the alley, the NCMB alley, comes off of Rosemary, goes parallel to the back of the building, and then returns to Rosemary presently. Our design alters the eastern end of that to take the alley straight to Henderson. What that does is it allows us to create a continuous pedestrian space in the new park directly up to the face of the building without having an intervening driveway and traffic. So we think that's again, for the pedestrian experience, we think that's a significant improvement. But along with that, we also had to remove all the solid waste and other elements that are right at the corner, the rear corner of the post office, and they're going to be placed down in an enclosed area along Henderson Street that'll be screened with field stone walls. Just a snapshot of the ground floor plan. The entire frontage facing Rosemary will be storefront, so it'll be transparent. You'll be able to walk along and see the activities inside. The main entrance is in the middle of the building facing Rosemary Street. And then all the parking is facing the alley to the rear, so it won't be visible from Rosemary Street. It's accessed from the alley entirely. And then the indoor bike parking is on that level, so bicyclists can come in directly from Rosemary Street along the side of the building and come into a door right into that space. So we think it's going to be quite convenient for bicyclists to access. So just a summary of some of the public realm improvements. The new park itself, which is using primarily materials that are compatible with the historic district with materials that are found in the guidelines. We're widening the sidewalk on Rosemary Street to, it's quite narrow now. It'll be over 16 feet wide. We're also widening it on Henderson Street by removing a few parallel parking spaces there and pushing the curb out. So we're going to get a generous sidewalk there. I already mentioned straightening the alley and cleaning up that whole service area behind the post office. So the entire walk from Franklin back to Rosemary is going to be a nice, pleasant pedestrian experience without walking by all those things. Presently, the street corner is surrounded with this concrete retaining wall. It goes on from a low point of around 3 feet to a high point of around 8 feet. makes that space pretty much inaccessible for pedestrians. And on the right-hand photograph, that's the view looking up toward Post Office Alley. The eastern end of the Wallace deck blocks that sight line. The new building will be pushed over to the west, so that sight line will be opened up and provide better lines of sight through from one street to the other. So this is the present situation looking from at the site from the opposite corner. There's a retaining wall, and the new design will regrade that, bring the corner all down to sidewalk level, make some very generous level areas with plenty of seating for people, and then a clear path up to the top of the space that leads one right into Post Office Alley. That grade change is about 15 feet from the high point down to the Henderson Street corner. And we'll have new street trees as well as new canopy and ornamental trees in the park space itself. Looking from the other direction, looking back towards Henderson Street, you could similarly, you can see how much that's going to be opened up visually to open up the frontages of those buildings, those businesses and other buildings facing Henderson Street, but also just physically opening it, making it much more walkable and pleasant for pedestrians to walk through or just linger. Finally, the view of Henderson Street closer up to the post office, the present situation. And then this is what we're proposing. On the left, you can see the alley coming down to Henderson Street, and then those stone walls and that gate with the ornamental mural, those are screening the solid waste elements and the other things within those. This gate, this is just a suggestion of a type of artwork. It could be many things, but we do think it's an opportunity that would be great for public art to have somebody commissioned to do something there. So now I'll talk a little bit more about the building. This is the view from further back from the corner on Henderson Street. This is the building in its current state of design. We just completed schematic design. So essentially, we tried to, as Becky showed in her diagrams, respect the spirit of the zoning envelope with stepping the building back. The lower part is just over 40 feet, and then it does step back. We couldn't stay entirely within that envelope. It would result in a pyramid building, which really would not work for laboratories, but we tried to maintain the sense of scale and stepping and articulation that we believe is the intent. So we have these two glass-clad volumes that step back from the street, and they are surrounding a central core element, which is clad in masonry, so that the northern facade will have more glass, which will be ideal for daylight penetration, natural lighting, and the southern facade will have smaller windows to limit the amount of solar gain. The view back, looking east on Rosemary Street, of course, on the right is the existing building that's being renovated. Of course, that old bridge is now gone, but then this is the proposed design. Again, you can see the way that the building mass and the facades have been articulated and broken up into smaller pieces to try to maintain that sense of scale on the street. The continuous storefront facing Rosemary Street, and then an open stairwell that starts to relate to the one in the parking deck, which would be behind where you're standing in this view, to give access directly down to parking. And then the frontage on Rosemary Street, the condition now with the narrow sidewalk and the pit that provides ventilation to the parking deck, that will be covered over with a new sidewalk. That's about 16.5 feet wide now to the glass line from the curb. It'll be partially covered for rain, and it provides, as I mentioned, this continuous transparent storefront and provides a very clear path of travel along the street down to the corner where the new park is. Then the view from Franklin Street here, we've taken that central mass element that's going to be clad in masonry and provided projecting bay windows, which start to articulate that in a way that we believe relates to the scale of the smaller commercial buildings facing Franklin Street. Of course, there is a mechanical penthouse on top. Being a lab building has a significant amount of mechanical equipment that has to be housed there. And we're studying, and we have received comments on this, we're studying ways to make that as attractive as we can architecturally, so it fits in and is not something that is objectionable. And then a view back from the opposite end of Franklin Street in front of the top of the hill, looking back where it's much less visible. In fact, it's only a bit taller than the elevator core of the existing 136 East Rosemary. That's the yellow brick piece here, and this is the new building behind it. So that's our presentation for tonight, and we welcome your comments and questions.
All right, Mr. Boincy.
Thank you for the presentation. Got a few questions here. So my first one, I'm curious, has Brian Peterson had an opportunity to review and comment on the design of the building?
Yes, we've met with him several times, both on the building and the park itself.
What has he said?
He's been quite positive in his comments, and he had some specifically to the park. He had some comments about how it might be programmed and things that we're still continuing to study. But he's been very supportive of the overall design direction, and his comments have been mostly supportive and constructive.
This is for our staff, but at some point, will we be getting written comments from Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they were part of the packet already, but we can certainly include them in the next round if they're not already there.
Thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate that, Mr. Stevenson. I do believe you. I just want to make sure we've got everything we need to make an informed decision.
Of course.
Let's see, my next question is regarding the sidewalk along Rosemary Street. I know that you said you're going to be widening it to 16 feet. Seems like a great idea. I'm just curious, what's the current width of the sidewalk now?
That sidewalk is around 5 feet, and then there's a tree planting strip. But it's, it's constrained by that brick wall with the guardrail that then drops off down to the lower levels of the parking deck. I don't have the exact dimensions, but I think the sidewalk itself is roughly about 5 feet wide.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. And I think this question is more for staff, but I know that there was a question posed about whether there is any potential for competition of spaces between what would go in the big consolidated deck versus the 3 decks in this current proposal. I was wondering, in terms of say game day parking, for instance, I'm wondering if something like that might be accounted for in thinking about I'll be honest here. I don't know how that necessarily works right now, game day parking with the town's parking, but just thinking about potential areas of competition there, I would hate for these two spaces to be in competition for spaces, whether it's general parking or game day parking or some other kind of parking. So I guess my question is, has that been taken into account?
I'm not sure if we have any information on the users of the deck and for special events, but we can certainly also bring back some information on that in the next round.
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, others, Mr. Parker, then Ms. Ryan.
Yeah, I actually have a bunch of questions. So first one is the EDA that was agreed to, seems like years ago, but it really wasn't. Specified 6 stories and 200,000 square feet. So can you talk a little bit about the thinking and the necessity for raising it to 7 stories and 238,000 square feet?
Yeah, we covered that in concept plan review. So the EDA was 6 stories up to 250,000 square feet. So as we studied that in concept plan review with council, with CDC and others, we arrived at that 7-story height, which we talked to you all about before, and those other various boards of achieving the program and what was the best fit overall architecturally for the site. If you recall, we had concepts that went from 6 to 8 stories in height.
The thing that puzzles me in that regard is I found it interesting that Greenbridge at 135 feet is a 10-story building and your building is 140 feet, but only 7 stories. So do you have, what kind of floor to floor heights? I mean, can you explain why you have 3 fewer floors, but 5 feet more height?
Yes, so a residential building would typically have 10 or 11 feet floor to floor. A lab building has 15, which is what we have. Also, the ground floor is an extra high space to align with the parking, so that's a 20-foot sort of floor. And then our height also includes, the zoning envelope height that was shown includes the mechanical penthouse. So the combination of those things makes it the total height.
So then is the entire building going to be wet labs where you need 15 floor to floor for all floors? I mean, because I remember again, I'm going back on memory from a way back that you were looking at roughly 2 floors of labs and the rest were going to be offices. So are you designing the building so that it can be 100% labs?
The minimum requirement from the EDA was 2 floors of lab.
Right.
And we were trying to we can't guess exactly 100% what's going to be in the building, but we're trying to have the capability of putting lab on multiple floors. And then from the design aspect, and Michael can speak to this more specifically, but it's tough to vary floor to floor heights as you got the building. Obviously, the first floor is an opportunity for that, and then regular floor heights as you go up. It just makes it it's a constructability component of the building.
And 2 questions related to sort of how you're changing the alley from, making a full loop to heading onto Henderson. One, how does that affect the post office vehicles and where do they park? And if you've got large trucks having to go on, deliveries and, I'm sure at some point there may be, semis, can Henderson handle that kind of commercial traffic?
The alley today is limited in terms of the size of vehicle that can get back in that alley. So we're not changing that. You cannot get a typical semi back there functionally today, and that won't change because we're not really changing in a big way the alley itself, especially as it turns the corner and comes around the Franklin Street buildings. We did take into account and communicated with the post office what trucks they use to deliver and disperse mail out of that facility. We have worked closely with staff on what the requirements of the post office lease with the town are in terms of parking requirements, functionality, and so forth, and that's incorporated into the design.
Okay, terrific. And just actually 2 last questions. One, and this is something that was relayed to me by a resident, a concern that with the, even though it's shielded by the wall, the solid waste receptacles, presumably dumpsters of some sort, being right next to the park, that in the summer months, there might be some significant odor problems. So will that thing be covered on top, or will it be open to the air? And how do you deal with potential for odors and also possibly vermin?
I think a lot of those existing challenges exist today with the facility that's already there. So
but we're trying to make it better.
Certainly. And I think enclosing it and making it serviceable from Henderson Street is an improvement of sorts. Obviously, there is the functionality of the gate and so forth on that level. That facility is a trash compactor. It's far from perfect, but it does help contain the trash and waste that goes in it versus an open air or a typical flip top dumpster that can have odor issues. I think there are ways to attenuate that. I'm not sure it covers the right answer to it. It's just having adequate height and room for that facility, one, to be serviced regularly, and then a compactor that helps contain that waste until it gets regularly serviced. We have consulted with, I think it's GFL is the waste consultant. We've talked to them, and some of that has to do with frequency of pickup, so that trash doesn't sit and obviously create odor. There's no perfect solution to that, but there are strategies that can be had to help mitigate it.
Okay. And last question, I like what you've done with the Franklin facing part of the building. I think, making it a full, fully engaged part of the building. How would that interact if at some point in the future, some of the buildings on Franklin Street, decide to go up beyond, right now everything's 2 stories there. If we get, in 5 years, 10 years, whenever, buildings that, 5, 6, 7-story buildings on Franklin Street, how will that affect your building? And, is there sufficient room to accommodate both?
Well, physically speaking, it wouldn't have an adverse effect. I think some of the tenants might lose some of their views, but on some of the floors, but it wouldn't have any functional adverse effect on the building. There's enough separation between the alley and the building.
Okay, just checking. Well, thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, Ms. Ryan, then Ms. Gu.
Yeah, Michael asked several of the questions I had. My last one is, you were talking about removing some of the parallel parking spaces on Henderson, which I know the merchants rely on. Are you taking them all out, or just the ones that are now adjacent to what will be the plaza area?
Just the ones adjacent to the park.
And do you know how many that is?
I just parked the other day. I think it's about 5,
Right.
maybe 6.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Gu.
Yes. So I see that your the top of the building, there is this, you said the top mechanical core. What's the height for that core?
It's 20 feet high.
So that core by itself is 20 feet high. So it's almost like 2-story building. I mean, the regular like residential, I'm just trying to get a sense of that. But in your rendering, is there 20 feet? It doesn't look like, I don't know if you are able to bring back that rendering for the mechanical core at the center or on the top, and just get a sense of what it's going to look like.
Here.
So that one, is that the gray part is what you're referring to? Is that the 20 feet?
Yes. So for example,
Yeah.
from here to here is
Uh-huh.
15.
Uh-huh.
And here, this is pushed back from the edge. So
Mhm.
you're not seeing the very bottom. So that's 20 there. Yes.
So by itself, then look, if you look at the building in front, of course, these buildings are on the ground, so they look bigger than the building is 6 or 7 story high above, in the air. So they probably look smaller, but the physical height, what is the building right in front on the Franklin Street? What's the height of the building? Yeah, right. That one.
Oh, I'm just estimating.
Mhm.
I'm going to say 30 some odd feet, maybe.
Uh-huh. 30, okay.
Yeah.
So
Just going by eye here.
yeah, well, then I think the top mechanical core, I think it's going to be very big. And so what's the width of that? What's the length of this mechanical core?
It's about 250 feet long.
So it's 250, yeah, 250 long and the 20 feet high. So it is a very big mass. So what is that the gray thing that you're drawing, and something in the middle, it's darker colored, whether you are trying to convey?
Those are air, I'm sorry, that's air intake. Because up there, what that is that's equipment to circulate the air in and out of the laboratories. And a laboratory, unlike an office, has to circulate a much higher volume of air. So it requires a much more intensive mechanical ventilation system. And all of that is in that penthouse.
Yeah, well, I'm very familiar. I've been to my medical school colleagues' wet lab. I understand that those temperature, moisture, and all those kind of standards usually are very strict. They need to follow that. So the which makes the air conditioning system in their buildings way more powerful than the one that we're having. So you said this is for air intake. Is the air outflow from that spaces as well? Where does the air go?
Yes, I'm sorry. It's both air intake and discharge.
Okay, so it's air intake and discharge from that area. Is this system going to be very noisy?
Very noisy. I mean, it like any building with rooftop equipment, it'll create some noise. We haven't done measurements to say exactly how audible it will be, but given the height and separation from the street, to my mind, it won't be anything objectionable, but we haven't done calculations for that.
Yeah, if you can do some calculation, that would be great, because I understand those wet labs, their air conditioning system usually is pretty big and has, so if you can calculate the noise, I think that'll be helpful, because this is our downtown core. We want to make sure that we have that information to go into that. Okay, and then you also talked about this the solid waste on the side of this building, right next to the public park area. So given it's a wet lab, does all the wet lab related waste is going to go to that solid waste, that dumping, that storage area?
That's contained within the building.
Can you say that again?
Domestic trash will use the common facility. Any lab related or has related waste for a lab use will be contained within the building and handled out of the building itself.
So they're not going to go to this waste, the solid waste outside?
That's correct.
So you have a separate storage for that?
Yes.
Okay. So because it's a wet lab, we all know that wet lab, there are different categories of wet lab based on what kind of chemical that is being handled. So what is the design for what kind of wet lab that we're designing for? Is that what kind of chemical standards, or what kind of are you going to dealing with the drugs or some biological matters, or some kind of testing liquids? What kind of categories that are you designing for?
Generally speaking, and Michael can probably speak to this more in depth, but this is not heavy research or heavy lab use. A building this size and height doesn't lend itself well to that. So not significant hazardous waste, but there's no definitive, here's a list of the kind of chemicals. And we look at those users, we take that into account of what the building can handle versus a heavy lab use. But I wouldn't view this as heavy lab use kind of space, given the design and scale of the building in terms of being vertical and not horizontal.
But wet lab, I do not use wet lab myself, but I have colleagues that are using wet labs. They're telling me that the wet lab, there are different safety standards based on what kind of the wet lab is designed for. So I'm just trying to gain some understanding of, given the significant wet lab space is going to be included, and especially judging from your mechanical core, the size of your mechanical core, probably it's a pretty significant presence of wet labs. So what kind of wet lab that you're designing for, what kind of safety standards, there are different categories, depends on what kind of chemicals or agents that they're going to be dealing with. So I'm sure that you're designing for a certain category of the wet labs. You cannot just say it's a general purpose, because they're actually very strict standards, safety standards for what kind of lab that you're designing for, and what kind of safety measures need to be in place, including what kind of air system that you need to be in place. Just try to kind of have an understanding of what kind of labs that you're designing for.
So it would have been great if you could have turned these questions in ahead of time, and we can ask the applicant to get that in writing back to you before the next meeting, because there are different levels and standards, and the town only approves a certain level of wet labs. There's 4 levels of wet labs, and they can get that information back to you. So we will move on to Mr. Nguyen. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few questions. Michael also asked some of the ones that I was going to, and actually on that note, I wanted to confirm that I understood this correctly. Sorry, I'm running on very small amounts of sleep. When you were talking about the building height for each floor, and you mentioned that the development agreement said at least 2 floors of wet lab, just to confirm, so will you have the ability to convert additional floors to wet lab space in the future if the need does arise or if there's a demand?
Yes, not 100%, but more than 2 floors could be lab in this particular building.
I guess my question is, whatever we end up deciding on, let's say it's 2 floors, 3 floors, we approve it and you build it, and there's 3 floors in the building. In 2-3 years, if the need for additional floors of wet lab space arise, because there's a lot of demand or whatever, could an additional floor be converted to wet lab space?
Yeah. Yes. There's a limit. You can't. This building, to get that. Michael can probably say this better than I can, but to get all the equipment to make this a 100% lab building doesn't all fit. So can you do more than 2 floors? Absolutely. I don't know what the max limit is. I think you could do at least 4 or more, but not all 7. Am I saying that correct, Michael?
Yeah, so the building has to be designed for flexibility, and unlike a user occupied lab like you would design for a university or corporate user, we can't predict with certainty the tenants that are going to move in here. So the building is designed for flexibility, both as a structural design and as a mechanical systems design. And even if a life science tenant were to take an entire floor, let's say, that floor would likely be about 50% lab space and 50% office space. So we have designed the structure so that any floor could have a lab tenant if that's who showed up and wanted to rent the space. The mechanical system is designed with flexibility that about half of the total building area could be actual lab use, which is probably the most that we would ever see in any scenario, because even a lab user will have a significant amount of office space. So that's would be the maximum that we would anticipate, and that's how the mechanical system is designed.
Gotcha. Thank you. That was helpful. Next question was on the bike parking. I believe TCAB also asked this, but I didn't see in the materials. Will there be specific bike storage for e-bikes? Like the mounted kind, for the heavier e-bikes type stuff?
Currently, we have the indoor bicycle parking is all wall racks. And we have gotten comments that those are not compatible with e-bikes. So we're gonna go back and take a fresh look at that so that we can provide some spaces for those as well.
Gotcha. Thank you. Next question, and this is related to the other building that y'all are renovating the 138, 137, I believe it is, Rosemary. I believe from the original rendering, there was like a large outdoor cool space thing on that building. And kind of in relation to this building, could you kind of give me a sense of how those line up?
The where the former R&R Grill was, there's a plaza level on the first floor. So the Rosemary ground floor, we call the ground floor. The first floor is 1 story up, and that plaza will be a building amenity. It's on the other side of 136 Rosemary.
Gotcha.
Facing the surface lot. And if you recall, the part of our agreement in the economic development agreement, we're using that as construction area today, and that will be converted to, we called it a nano park, they call it a public green space as part of the requirement of turning that space back to the town when we're done using it for construction.
Gotcha. Oh, I'm not talking about the nano part. I was talking, I think it's like near the rooftop of that building, at least on the rendering, I believe, in the original remodeling. That was
It's
like
the outdoor amenity is at the plaza level. It's not on the top.
Gotcha. And then could you walk me through the pedestrian improvements on Henderson?
Yes, so Henderson Street, as I mentioned, we're removing some parallel parking spaces, widening the sidewalk, and adding a tree planting strip that matches the new streetscape treatment on Rosemary Street, and it'll have new street trees as well.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
All right, that leaves me with a few questions, and we'll go hear from the public. On the street trees and stuff, the spaces you're showing are smaller than we know help a tree survive. So you planning to have water that runs to the trees around the street corners of the building?
You meaning irrigation?
Yes.
I honestly don't know the answer. I have to consult with their landscape architect, but they have said there'll be a special type of structural soil under that to to help keep it irrigated and aerated. I'll just say the tree planting strip, we simply matched the streetscape standard on Rosemary Street, so that was the basis for that.
And while I understand that on a tour of this kind of situation in another city that I was at a mayor conference, they talked about how important it was to run irrigation to the trees because of the heat index, even when the soil below. So I encourage you to consider that. In a 238,000 square foot building, what would be the normal number of parking spaces you would be asked to provide?
I'm going to do here real quick. Depending on the location, if it was suburban, you'd probably be talking about 1,000 spaces.
Mm-hmm.
In an urban situation with transit access, half of that, maybe 500 or something.
And you're doing 158, so that means the majority of your workers would probably park in the parking deck if they drove, or they would be taking transit downtown or riding bikes. Is that right? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and you've heard our concern about, not competing with us, but also I think I want to share the concern that I do want some of your workers to park with us during the day. So we can work that out as well.
And that, the initial concept, if you recall, had up to 200 spaces. We've studied that design to reuse that existing hole in the ground. Mm-hmm. To put it bluntly, we're at 158 spaces. So as we studied that with the town for the new parking deck, that was always the balance between this and the new parking deck. So that need is a little bit higher, from 200 down to 158. That all has to go to the deck, the new deck.
Does it really change the aesthetics of the building if you're not having every floor be wet lab? Does every floor need to be 15 feet tall, or could the top floors be a little? I mean, the height is something we're kind of all sort of going, oh, that's a little taller than we expected. I'm not an architect, so I can't tell you, but I know you stepped back a little bit, but does it really affect the overall aesthetics of the building? Michael, you're muted.
Oh, I was unmuted and I muted myself. I did it backwards. I think it's something that could be studied. It may be more of an issue for leasing, not being able to restrict, potential tenants on which floor they might choose. So that's something I won't answer, but it could be studied architecturally.
I guess I would suggest that we take at least a look at that, because I don't know many office buildings that are actually 15 feet tall if they're not being used for some specific use like wet lab. That's a pretty tall ceiling. 12 feet is even a pretty tall ceiling for commercial. But I encourage you to think about that as we hear comments about the height and concerns about the height. Don't want to overshadow our Franklin Street, but we also don't want to be scared to have the full potential of this building being a great research area. So,
if I could just add one other thing, in terms of the marketplace we're in, the other buildings of this type generally have that floor height. So we wouldn't want to be at a competitive, Grub wouldn't want to be a competitive disadvantage, I wouldn't think.
Okay, I've heard that. I'll save my comments about the green space needing more green for when we come back to comments. These are just clarifying questions now. But all right, I know we have some members of the public who wish to comment on this. We have some of you who pre-registered, and Mr. Parker will call you in 2 at a time. But if you didn't pre-register and you still would like to speak, we welcome that. If you could use the raise your hand function or the *9 if you're by phone. We would welcome your comments, and we do ask you to keep your comments within 3 minutes. This is the first of the 2 public hearings on this building that we've been working towards, and there'll be another opportunity on November 17th when this item comes back before us. So we share that with you. And Mr. Parker, would you call in some folks, please?
Yes, we have Justin Haslett speaking on behalf of the Cultural Arts Commission, followed by Janice Farringer. And we also have some hands.
Hi, am I on?
You are on, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, thanks. It turned off and it confused me. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm Justin Haslett. I'm here with Janice Farringer, representing the Cultural Arts Commission. Last week, we had an opportunity to do a courtesy review of the 150 East Rosemary project. Obviously, the economic impact of this project is beyond the scope of anything we can contemplate with cultural arts. We were, I think, disappointed to see the quote unquote town green lacking much in the way of representation of what makes our town a richly culturally diverse place. We were a little confused, and we're having some ongoing conversations with staff around the Percent for Art project and how that may or may not have been a possibility in this particular project. And we just want to remind town and council moving forward in future capital projects to keep the commission in mind, to keep Percent for Art in mind. I think there's a lot of opportunity, even with some time now, to find ways to use the town green as it exists to install opportunities for the display of art that can come and go. We certainly hope there will be more than just some paintings on the doors that conceal the garbage area. That was a little less than we were hoping for, I think, to be diplomatic. So we want to be part of the conversations moving forward. We think it's great everything the town is doing, obviously, in every other way. Obviously, it's a science-focused space, but I think art can play a role in creating a really vibrant downtown space. And we just encourage future conversations with the commission and with staff on bringing art to the space. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Is Ms. Farringer going to speak, or were you speaking for both, Mr. Haslett?
I don't believe Janice has anything to add, but I'll leave that to her to raise her hand if she does.
Okay.
I do wish to speak.
Good, welcome.
Okay.
I remind the council that Section 2-180, Duties and Powers of the Cultural Arts Commission, actually require us to give you information and encouragement about arts in Chapel Hill. And those, we were given what is called a courtesy review. We were also not listed among the commissions that were listed at the very beginning that said so-and-so design commission approval with exceptions. We weren't even included in that. And I do think that the town is overlooking the powers and duties of the Cultural Arts Commission. And that is important because we may be the only spokespeople, for art in downtown, which has been to this point, I'm talking about outside art, sculpture, stone, metal, whatever, has been sorely lacking. And the other thing is, as in the cultural piece of cultural arts, the town green is really not green. And the dumpster is really a dumpster. And we were told that we would have the opportunity to decorate the gates to that dumpster. Now, I know it's a compactor. I heard him say that, but it's still a dumpster. And I think that if they're keeping the other garbage inside the building, then they can figure out how to do away with the dumpster and perhaps save that magnolia tree on the corner. I don't think that all that grading is necessary. I don't think it's pretty. I don't think it adds to downtown. There's too much hardscape. It's really going to be hot, ladies and gentlemen. We have another place downtown that is all hardscape and some bushes, and it is really, really hot and basically unusable for cultural gatherings. So either the space needs to have some grass, or it needs sail cover to provide shade. But I really, that's my personal opinion on that. But I do think the Arts Commission should be consulted seriously and given the right to make comments on this in an official way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Robert Beasley, followed by Josh Rosenstein.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Thank you. I want to really impress upon the mayor and the town council to consider the implications of the height and the exterior design of this building on sound and acoustics. It was touched on by Councilmember Gu with the machinery on the top floor. But I also think you need to consider the recent petitions from communities like Greenbridge condominiums, where we have very tall, smooth surface buildings downtown that are amplifying noise and amplifying sound. And looking at the design renderings of this building and considering where it's going to be placed right next to an existing building that is one of, and I think the tallest in the downtown area, and the parking deck, sound is going to be amplified once this is in place. And we need to really understand what the acoustic characteristics of that open space that's very attractive is going to be. I'm quite concerned that it is going to be very loud and have serious acoustic implications for the downtown area at the height and the surface design that's being proposed. So please take that into consideration and do some research. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Josh Rosenstein, and I believe he is the last person who wishes to speak, unless we get a last minute entry.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. I'm a town resident. I also serve on the Cultural Arts Commission with Justin and with Janice, and I want to echo their comments as well. And I appreciate the way that they articulated that, and I share their view completely. I'm very invested in this project. I host an open mic at a business on Henry Street, so I'm in this area every week. I saw the version of this presentation presented at the Cultural Arts Commission meeting last week, and I think there's great opportunity for public art that we're missing in this piece. I think that this project has a great opportunity, especially considering its location directly adjacent to Peace and Justice Plaza. I think our Community Arts and Culture Office has done a great job with public art in that space recently, particularly in producing large-scale art projects that reflect our town values, particularly our arts and culture's value of inclusion, that arts and culture for the many, not the few. We embrace diversity and advance equity within our community and the world. I saw that shot in this presentation with the post office and those businesses on Franklin and that large empty space. And I think we have a great opportunity to have some public facing art that represents our town's value on such a large marquee project that really, I saw that shot and I see it as such a blank canvas to be able to express our town's values, especially with such a high profile project, in a way where we could really show off what we stand for and be really proud of it. So I would also encourage collaboration with the commission and particularly with staff with Susan and the Office of Community Arts and Culture, because they have a lot of really great ideas and I feel like we could really use their talent. I appreciate this opportunity to speak and thank you for taking public comments.
Thank you. We have a raised
we have
hand.
one additional person, Sean Kavanaugh wishes to speak.
Putting kids down at home, so I'll just be brief.
Welcome.
This looks really cool. I just wanted to chime in and say from maybe an alternate view that height's not ever been an issue. When I lived downtown, I lived like one block off Franklin for 3 or 4 years. I think it looks amazing. I think if you want to see a wet lab for noise, you can go to Morisco Hall on Mason Farm. I've been there many times. I don't think I ever noticed the noise, but it's quite a bit higher. So I imagine there's multiple wet labs on UNC campus that you can walk past if you really want to hear it and measure noise. I can't imagine living downtown that would actually be a noise breaker. There's buses, sirens, things going off. It's a city. So I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think the height's a big deal. I think it looks really cool and I'm glad we're moving forward on this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, Council, we'll bring it back to you for comments. Ms. Ryan, then Mr. Nguyen.
Thank you so much for coming here. I want to say at the start, I'm really supportive of this project. I'm so happy it's coming through. I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to downtown. So thank you for that and for all you're doing for us here. That said, I have significant concerns about the height, especially the renderings you showed tonight, which is kind of where you're showing the circulation patterns. And it just showed how big this building is in relation to everything else. So I know that there are other buildings that are not that much shorter, but many of those have, like at Greenbridge, it's the smaller towers. It's not the whole building. You have a very big kind of squared, massive building here. So we're going to feel a lot of height. One thing I would like to do is if you could bring back sections to show the contextual relationship to the buildings on Franklin Street, to the buildings across the street on Rosemary. And that would be very helpful to me to actually kind of get a sense for what this massing is like. You know, right now with the renderings that you showed us, we can't see the whole building. I don't really get a feel for what the size is going to feel like in there. I don't know if you could bring back kind of videos. I know that much of the architectural software you work with is capable of generating that stuff. I think that would be very helpful. But my initial feeling at looking at these renderings is that this is the amount of mass that you've got here is just kind of out of place in the area. So that would be the first issue. The south wall especially is going to loom over Franklin. I don't know what we can do to make that be kind of a better neighbor to that space. It seems to me at one point during concept plans, we were seeing some outdoor space there or just something that more related to Franklin Street. It wasn't just a big wall with some panels on it. So if there's anything we can do there with those architectural treatments. I keep thinking about the Southbridge Lofts at the other end of Franklin Street and how it just makes this big blank backdrop to some really very attractive buildings. So I want to make sure that that south facade plays well with what we're going to be seeing from Franklin Street. I agree with the CDC that it would be great to find another place to put those dumpsters, compactors. No matter how careful you are with managing trash, it just smells in North Carolina when it gets hot. It just does. So I think we need to really try to look harder and to figure out what that solution is going to be. At some point, I'd like to see in the final resolution something that specifies what level of lab work will be allowed, what kind of uses will be allowed here. I know we've discussed that in the past, but I think that needs to actually be specified in the resolution. I'd like to have the CDC have the ability to review and approve the materials and elevations, not simply review. And I think materials should be there in there as well. Just a note on the trees. I agree with the mayor that we have to be really careful about planting in those very narrow tree wells. Right now you're specifying willow oaks, which are lovely and completely appropriate to Chapel Hill, but a quick walk down Franklin Street or anywhere shows that they're going to just overwhelm a 3-foot planting area by the time they're mature. So if the space is really narrow, you may want to consider some other oaks. I know people went through a lot of back and forth over at the Rosemary deck to try to find trees that would work better. You're also going to run into issues as those oaks get big and spread. They're going to be bumping up into the front of your building. You're going to be having to trim them back. I think you just need to send your landscape architects back for another try on that. And that said, I think in the plaza, one more big shade tree in that main paved area, that's just going to bake in the summertime. We just need all the shade we can get there. And I have some other comments that are a little more technical about things like loading docks and where you're going to be storing gases and that kind of thing. So I won't take up time in the meeting with that, but I'll send that along as a memo to staff. So thanks very much.
Mr. Nguyen, then Ms. Gu.
Thank you. Super excited for this project. A few of my comments, I definitely would love to hear more about y'all revisiting the e-bikes and would love to see a pretty good proportion of those 150 spaces dedicated to e-bikes. My hope and goal is that a lot of the employees working in this office building will commute via e-bike as they become more accessible to young folk. So that would be great in encouraging them and having a really accessible place to park. The second thing, I do agree that the green does need a little more green and more programming. I think there's a big opportunity, especially with the public space in front of the new deck where, I think in the rendering we had like a food truck and things like that, potentially some coordinated programming between this town green and that space to kind of bring more people downtown and things like that. It just really presents a good opportunity. I also think that this is a good opportunity for public art, especially with the science-based building. I think, one particular idea in general is showcasing Dr. Corbett, Chapel Hill, or Orange County native scientists, really showcase the diverse background of scientists emerging in our world today. The size of the building is not as much of a concern for me. I know we really see this as an economic driver for our downtown, and jobs need space. So other than that, I think those are all my big comments. Excited to continue seeing how this project evolves. Thank y'all.
All right. Ms. Gu, then Mr. Parker, and then Mr. Boynton.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think my concern, first concern is I want to make sure that this building is safe. So if you can provide any information about this biological safety level for this building that is designed for, I think that would be very helpful. That is a key information. I think it needs to be included in this conditional zoning. Second is this is a very prime downtown location. So we wanted to adding to the downtown vibrancy. So I think what did the building look like, sound like, is very important to us. I think that if you can identify some buildings at the UNC, the medical school or the UNC hospital or ACC ambulatory care center, anywhere the building that will be comparable to the one that you are proposing with regards to size, height, or the mechanical core or anything that you can identify, I think that will be very helpful for both the council to understand what's the building that you're actually proposing, and also for the public to get a sense of what the data we are talking about. I think that if you can identify a reference building in the School of Medicine or the UNC hospital anywhere, I think that would be very helpful. And then I think that it's with regard to the overall look of the green space. I agree with many comments over here, and would want it to be more green. And we have the 140 West of Franklin Street Plaza, and the usage is pretty low, especially during the summer. Nobody wants to sit there under the sun without a tree. So if we really want that space to be used and enjoyed by the pedestrians, as well as the employees, I think we need more green spaces in any way that we can. Then with the trash dumpster, or I don't know what or solid waste site, I also do not understand that if you can keep other bio I don't know if you can process or storage those waste inside the building, why that you need this outdoor spaces for the solid waste. I don't know how you're going to designate different solid waste at different places. So if you can, you could clarify that. I mean, if there's any way to keep them indoor, I think that will be really improve the quality of that area. So I think, of course, the last issue is about the size of the building. I mean, from your rendering, it looks like a very big building, especially the mechanical core in the center, which is around 250 feet wide and 20 feet tall. That is a very massive structure. And especially for the people looking from distance, probably that's the only thing that they see on the very top mechanical core. So if you can provide more rendering, either by video or of different angles to look at it, what it looks like, I think that would be very helpful. I think people needs to know what this mechanical core actually look like and sound like. So if you can provide any information that will help the council and the community to understand that proposal, that'd be very helpful.
Okay, Mr. Parker, then Mr. Boyncey.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I like the way the building looks. It's really interesting architecturally. I'm really pleased with it overall. And of course, 1,000 jobs plus or minus downtown is near miraculous. So thank you for all of that and for wanting to invest in our town. A couple of things. I think one thing that Ms. Goose said, I think is correct, is that, you know, the mechanical penthouse or whatever we're calling it is, you know, for many people will be the most visible part of the building since it's the highest, obviously. So perhaps thinking through, I know you need it, I mean, you can't make it go away. So thinking through if there are things that can be done to make it more architecturally interesting. I don't know what that is. I have not a clue, but you know, maybe there's something that could be done. The other thing, which would obviously be far more expensive, is what you see in taller buildings is actually creating a mechanical floor within the building envelope rather than having everything on the roof. And I don't know if there are any solutions that would allow you to do that. And this building may just simply not be tall enough to justify that kind of construction. The other things I wanted to think about, I think also the town green could be, number one, greener. I think also you've laid it out, at least to my eye from the renderings, as a place where people would go through rather than as a place where people would stay and linger. And so I think you need to think more about, not just steps, but real seating there, and thinking about better making it into a place, at least when weather is good, where people can, where there can be a food cart or something, or a coffee shop in the lobby of the building and people can bring food out, but make it into, be more intentional about the design to keep people there rather than as something that they would just walk through while they're going from Rosemary to Franklin. The other thing I meant to ask earlier, and again, I'm sure it's there, but I couldn't see it on the rendering, but I saw lots of steps, but I didn't see how handicapped folks would be able to use it to get from Rosemary to Franklin through Post Office Alley. So I'd like to make sure that this green, given the terracing and everything, is still fully handicapped accessible. And I'm sure you've taken care of it, but I just wanted to put that in as a cautionary note. I think one thing I'd like you to at least think about in the realm of e-bikes is, and perhaps it can be, maybe it's better accommodated in the parking deck, but I think between the two new structures, we need to have a good place for an e-bike share. I think that is going to be incredibly important downtown, and maybe, working with town staff, we can figure out where's the best place to put one. And I know the town is working with the university to start thinking about e-bike shares. And I think this looks to me like a prime location for where to have one of those stations. Again, it could be in the parking deck, it could be, it's part of this building, but between the two, I think we need that. I'm still trying to process the size and the height of the building. Clearly, it's, much larger and taller. When we talked about 7 stories, I think, many of us were thinking, 12-foot floor to floors rather than 15. So I don't know what the answer is, and I'll probably get used to it. But if there are things that could either reduce the height, or if there are things that can reduce the appearance of height, I think that would be helpful, because when this building goes up, until Chapel Hill acclimates, it is going to startle people. So I would just put that out there as a suggestion. But I really like the architecture. I like the direction you're heading. And so thank you.
Okay, Mr. Boyncey had technical problems. We'll be back on in a minute, so I'll go ahead and share. I agree with a lot of comments that have been made already. We need more green in the green area. I love the idea of incorporating more art. Saw some of these same types of things where they actually incorporated art into the walkways that the Stones had, and being a science building, that might be very cool to have there too. I didn't know if you would consider a water feature of some sort, not a splash pad, but a water feature to add some interest to the area. But we definitely have to have more green, more shade. So there needs to be more thought about, as Mr. Parker said, not just walking through, but being able to linger somewhere and not cook while you're sitting out there, and make it a lot more interesting to want to be a place to be, not just a place to pass through. Also had concerns about the dumpster situation. I don't know if there's anything else. I know you've been struggling with this as well, but it just doesn't seem like a very nice fit for our pedestrian walking along Henderson Street, then have to wait and interact with a garbage truck backing in, or a front loader coming in. That would be very interesting. That's a narrow street there, so the turning radius is going to be difficult for a truck in the first place. So I know the other businesses on Franklin have the bins in the back alleyway. They're not large, so there just may be some way to partner to do something on the alleyway on the back side. I'm not sure, but I'd like you to take another look at that. I don't have as much problem with the height as I do with the appearance of height, like Mr. Parker said as well, and the massing. It just seems I like the architectural direction as well, but I think there could be ways to make the look not be so intense right there. But I'm excited about this building really bringing that many jobs, having new life downtown, especially on that end of town. The merchants are excited. It's just going to add a lot more vibrancy to our community. I applaud you for not building too much parking there, because we're building the other parking garage, and eventually we hope all the parking goes away. That's the goal, that people will be taking transit and e-bikes and other ways of getting around. So, but I do want you to go back and talk to Susan Brown and the Arts Commission. I think there could be some really interesting things there, even if it's that you provide the pads for art to be displayed. I think this is a great place to do that, visually interesting for folks. It could even be done on the terracing. There's all kinds of ways to mix in more green and more art in the space. I really think it could be a wonderful opportunity, and I like the science theme just because of the building too. Mr. Boincy, did you have some things to share with us?
Yes, just a few comments. And I know that our downtown can really benefit from the jobs that's going to be created here. As the mayor said, it's an opportunity to revitalize our downtown, especially along Rosemary Street. I too would be interested in seeing some places where art can go on the town green, especially if exhibit space is not going to be offered in the building. It would be nice or even better to have art displayed outside the building. To the questions I had earlier about Mr. Peterson, we'd definitely like to see his written comments or him being available to comment on the design at the recessed hearing, including perhaps some commentary on the town green space itself, because I know we've heard a number of concerns about its present design. Really appreciate Mr. Parker's point about ensuring that the space is handicapped accessible and friendly. So yeah, and I appreciate the building design. I like where it's headed. Got some more work to do on it, but that's my comments.
I did forget to ask the environmental efficiency of the building. What are you going after? It is a scientific building. Are there standards that we can expect to have for energy efficiency in this building?
The minimum we're shooting for is LEED certified, and then we will be trying to get to gold, but we're too early in the design process to say that with certainty.
Are there any questions from the applicant of comments they didn't understand? Do you need me to summate the comments? I've written a lot of it down, but I'm sure you have as well.
I think I took pretty good notes, but thank you. Yeah, very good comments. Appreciate the feedback and the dialogue very much.
Okay, great. Well, as you heard, we're excited about finding a good place to meet with this and make it a reality for our downtown. And we are very pleased that this kind of new environment is coming to our downtown core. So it's great. All right, we will be recessing this public hearing to November 17th. And need a motion to that effect, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Boincy, that we recess this to November 17. Roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Boincy.
Aye.
Ms. Gu.
Aye.
Okay, good. Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan. Couldn't hear you.
Aye.
Thank you. And the mayor, thank you. The mayor says aye as well. Sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. We will see you back on November 17th.
Thank you.
All right. As a friendly reminder, we have bumped item number 17, the Housing Advisory Board's recommendation funding for affordable housing, to November 10th. So that brings us to item number 18, review results and consider recommendations for the employee housing program. Who do we have with us? Oh, we have Mr. Broman Folks. Welcome.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Nate Broman Folks, the town's affordable housing manager. And tonight I'm joined by Megan Culp, the town's community development program manager, to talk to you about the employee housing pilot program, the results of the 2-year pilot, and some recommendations that we have for improving it. Now, I'll first start with some background, what's led us to the creation of the employee housing program, some of its goals, and then the results. We'll talk about the evaluation process and findings, and then I'll turn it over to Megan to discuss the recommendations that we have. So in spring of 2017, Council asked staff to explore options for helping employees live in town if they wish to. And so from that direction, staff implemented a design thinking approach using lots of stakeholder employee engagement, as well as general best practice research to come up with a recommended pilot program. And based on that research, we heard a lot of interest from town employees. A lot of folks wanted to live in town or closer to town. We also found in the research that a lot of the benefits of these programs met town goals, such as our town's climate action, affordable housing, transportation goals. Also can lead to improved employee retention and recruitment, as well as help facilitate greater connection to the community among employees. So in November of 2018, council approved the pilot program. A few months later, we began rolling it out. And 2 years into the program, we began the evaluation process. So just a quick overview of what is in the pilot program. There were two major incentives. One was for home ownership, which had down payment and closing cost assistance up to $7,500 for the purchase of homes inside Chapel Hill. And we did receive 11 applications from employees, although none have received the homeownership assistance yet. We do know that 3 employees ended up purchasing homes outside of Chapel Hill. 1 left town employment, and 7 are eligible for the program, but have not yet found a home to purchase in the eligible area that is in their affordability range. And the second incentive is related to securing rental housing, and that consists of one-time down payment assistance for security deposits and utility connection fees. The assistance range from about $1,500 to $2,000 based on bedroom size. We had more success with the rental incentive. 13 employees applied and 7 have received that assistance so far. So after the 2-year mark, we began evaluating the program. Used a 3-step approach, first starting with employee surveys to help us understand employees' awareness of the program, what their incentive preferences were, and barriers that they have come across to utilizing the program. We also conducted stakeholder interviews, both with employees who have used the program or applied to it, but as well as employees who have helped implement the program and outside partners who have helped implement the program. And then we used real estate market data to help us really see what is the available inventory of housing that's affordable to employees who are eligible for the program. So some of the key findings that we have are town employees still are very interested in living in Chapel Hill or close to work. 70% of employee respondents said they were interested. The second key finding is that affordability remains the greatest barrier to town employees. We've heard comments like housing in Chapel Hill is extremely expensive and there's a low supply. And so we also looked at the MLS data to see what that told us. And as you can see here, the sales price of homes over the last 3 years, of course, have been trending upwards. And the first half of 2021 saw an average sales price of over $500,000. So that has been a barrier to employees. The third major finding was that there's a limited availability in Chapel Hill for the housing types that fit employee needs. So we heard comments like only properties I could afford were student rentals or weren't in great shape, or what we heard a lot of was that employees were really interested in home ownership and having a yard and space. And so we looked at the number of single family homes sold to eligible employees and saw that only about 200 single family homes were sold in 2020 that were affordable to eligible employees. We also looked at the surrounding area and throughout Orange County, and that number increases pretty dramatically when you look at the surrounding area. I'll now turn it over to Megan to talk about our recommendations.
Thank you, Nate, and good evening, Mayor and Council. So based on the program evaluation that Nate described, we were able to set some goals for the recommended changes to address. First and foremost, We wanted to increase the number of employees who are able to use the housing assistance. And to do this, we knew we had to address the issues of affordability and housing. We also recognize that not all house types are the right fit for every family, and housing choice is an important component to whether employees will choose to take advantage of the program. Therefore, it was important to recommend changes that would include as many naturally occurring affordable housing, especially single-family housing, as possible, while still maintaining that community connection. And we also heard from the evaluation that employees wanted more support navigating through the process. So to meet these goals, we developed 3 recommendations for the program. So the first recommendation is to expand program eligibility. The main way to address the affordability concerns and to increase the variety of eligible affordable housing stock is by expanding the geographic area. The pilot program only allows employees to rent or purchase homes in Chapel Hill town limits, but as Nate showed you previously, that greatly limits the affordable properties that could become available, which is why we are recommending to expand the area eligible for rental and homeownership to within 5 miles of Chapel Hill town limits. This both meets the original goals of the program of helping employees live closer to work, reducing commute times, increasing job satisfaction, and encouraging engagement in the community, but also increases the potentially available housing stock enough to make a difference. This option would double the amount of naturally occurring affordable rentals and more than quadruple the number of all types of for sale homes at affordable price points. So in developing the recommendation to expand eligibility, we looked at a lot of different possibilities. For the geographic area alone, we considered other options, including 5 and 10 miles from Town Hall and expanding to all of Orange County. As we started looking at the data for expanding the area to 5 and 10 miles from town, it became clear that those were not great options. Expanding to 5 miles from Town Hall did not add many affordable housing units to the eligible area and excluded some of the closest areas with a big jump in the number of units. And then 10 miles from Town Hall had the opposite issue. So while it added a lot of affordable housing stock, we felt that expanding to addresses in Cary and Apex and downtown Durham and Pittsburgh that were included in that radius did not achieve the program goal of facilitating community connection and having employees live closer to work. On the other hand, the option of expanding the eligible area to all of Orange County is one that we looked at a lot more closely and we discussed in detail during the evaluation process. There are some pros for considering Orange County that include that the existing countywide community partnerships would make it an easy program to administer. It would be easy for employees to understand and find a house. And it also might provide more variety of housing options for employees. However, there were 2 primary observations we heard that ultimately led us away from the county-wide recommendation. The first is that parts of Orange County can still be pretty far away, thus not really helping employees live closer to work. And the second was that there are a lot of affordable properties just over the lines in Durham and Chatham that are much closer and potentially more connected to Chapel Hill that would be excluded, some of which even have Chapel Hill addresses. So this observation was supported by the home sales data, and we'll show you that on the next slide. But there is also an additional option to expand program eligibility, and that would be to increase the income limit. We heard from a number of employees that were interested in the program, but just made a little bit too much, yet still didn't make enough to afford anything. And increasing the income limit from 115% AMI to 125 or 150 would help cover the gap where employees don't qualify for other assistance but can't quite afford a mortgage, and it would allow more employees to be eligible for the program. However, this option does not address the housing barriers for lower income employees. And given our relatively limited resources, we chose to focus our recommendations on using funding to serve those with the greatest need. So here you can see the number of residential properties of all types that sold since the beginning of 2019 within a 5-mile radius of town limits for $450,000 or less. That is just slightly higher than the affordable mortgage amount for a household of 4 at 115% AMI. So this demonstrates the increase in potentially affordable housing stock employees could access just with us changing the eligible area to 5 miles outside of town. And it also shows the limited number of houses in Chapel Hill for households in our income range. So then recommendation number 2 came up because we realized that expanding program eligibility would have a huge impact on accessibility. We still heard from employees and stakeholders that the incentive was not enough to have a big enough impact on affordability to make moving into town within reach. So we are recommending to increase the incentive amounts and to broaden the eligible uses. On the rental side, the recommendation is to increase the incentive to 2.5 times the fair market rent adjusted each year. The thinking behind this increase is that it would be roughly equivalent to first and last month's rent plus utility connection fees. We also recommend allowing future rent payments as an eligible expense so that after covering deposits, the balance of the maximum incentive amount could be used as a one-time upfront payment to the landlord that employees could budget out over the year to reduce their monthly rent. For example, say the employee has a fairly low deposit, so they have $2,400 left from the award that goes to the landlord for future rent. And that would be equal to the employee of having to pay $200 less in rent each month. Then when looking at the recommended increase in the home ownership incentive, we wanted to see if we could provide the minimum down payment required by most affordable and first-time homebuyer mortgage programs, which is usually around 3%, and we based it on a 4-person household. This got us to the recommended increase to $12,500 for homeownership assistance. And then to also more highly encourage employees to purchase a home within town limits, we would allow the max award in Chapel Hill only and keep the current incentive amount of $7,500 in eligible areas outside of town. The lower amount would go further in those outlying areas, with there being more available stock in the expanded area. So finally, we are recommending and have already started enhancing the employee outreach and engagement. We heard loud and clear that employees wanted more support in finding housing and navigating the process. So we plan to provide more trainings and information to employees, including during recruitment, orientation, and onboarding. Which brings us to the question of funding. So originally $50,000 was budgeted for the pilot program, and we still have about $43,000 left. We anticipate that that will be able to serve 2 employees with homeownership and 5 to 7 with rental assistance, with the updated requirements and program criteria. And then we would need to be looking for new funding. So we are here in front of you tonight to consider some of these program updates. Once we know what the program is going to look like in its final form, we'll update the materials and processes through the end of the year and be ready to roll out the updated program early in 2022. So our recommendation to you tonight is to approve Resolution R16, approving updates to the employee housing program.
Thank you. That was very straightforward. All right. Oh, welcome, Ms. Anderson. You popped in. I didn't see you pop in. Great. Council questions? Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. I really appreciated a lot of the details, especially about kind of the 5-mile radius and the justification. That's really helpful. So in terms of sustainability, this is probably a Maurice question, but in terms of sustainability, what would be the funding mechanism after the $43,000 is gone?
I mean, we'd have to build it into our general fund budget each year. If we were to continue to go beyond that 43, we'd have that discussion as part of the budget process.
Okay. And so you're thinking it would just come out of the general fund and that it would be a recurring budget item?
Yeah, at least, I mean, that's my thinking tonight would be the most logical place to put that.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
Other questions? Ms. Ryan? Then Mr. Boynton?
Yeah, just a question about the rental program. So you're talking about expanding it to include some rent as well. If they still hadn't reached the maximum, is that only good for a year, or are they re-eligible every year to receive that amount?
Good question. It would be a one-time stipend, so it would help them get settled in, And however long that future rent would last into the year is how much they would have. And then they also do take as part of the program their budgeting. So hopefully that will also help them to figure out how to time that out over the year and make it sustainable more long term.
Okay, because the helping them with the down payment and the home ownership, that makes a lot more sense because that is kind of a one-time thing. It's just with the recurring rental expenses. That I get helping with the upfront ones, that makes sense. I just wonder how many folks will find themselves in trouble trying to keep up with the rent levels at that point. But yeah, thank you for a really thorough and understandable presentation. Appreciate that.
Mr. Boynton?
Yes, thank you for the great informative presentation. So I had a question about something kind of dating back a couple years ago when we were initially talking about this and voted on this pilot program. I can remember as part of the presentation, staff had talked about having, I think it was financial and housing counseling workshops as a part of the program. Was just wondering about that piece. Was that something y'all were able to implement? And if so, how many workshops, or could you tell us a bit about how those workshops went?
Yeah, and that is actually a requirement of the program for anyone who receives assistance to go through a budget or home ownership counseling. And then we partner with Community Home Trust to receive the applications and do that training. And then we also offer training and budget and counseling, home ownership counseling sessions throughout the year, every year, through Habitat for Humanity and Community Home Trust for any employee, whether they apply for the program or not. And those happen a few times per year through those partners.
Do you have a sense, especially from the employee side, folks who participated in the programs, how helpful they found them? Yeah, did you get any feedback on them, on the workshops?
Sure, I can speak to that. So we heard that the financial counseling was particularly helpful. The ask that we heard from employees through interviews in particular, but also through the surveys, was to do a little bit more that demonstrated and showed them what some of the opportunities for homeownership were in the community. And so we have been working on developing additional kind of lunch and learns and trainings to hold in-house with outside partners to show them what opportunities there are. We've already held one session like that where we had Habitat for Humanity and Community Home Trust come in and talk about their application process and how to get in the program. And we also use that opportunity to talk again about the employee housing program. So we're working on developing additional trainings that the employees requested, but they seem to really find the existing financial counseling through Community Home Trust to be very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Parker, then Ms. Gu.
Yeah, I was just curious if you had any sense of what success would look like. Clearly, nobody getting the home ownership is, assistance is certainly clearly not a success. But if this were going well, if you felt that this program was really successful, do you have any sense of how many people per year you'd like to see getting this assistance?
Yeah.
You're shooting at?
We've talked about that. We've looked at what success would mean, what that would look like. And we are anticipating with the remaining funds that we could assist somewhere between 7 to 9 employees. And if we approve the eligibility increases, we do believe we could do about that every year or so would be the goal. And there's currently about 9% of town employees who live in town. So that would be about a 10% increase every year that we would be talking about if we're able to assist 6 or 7 employees. So I think that's what our thinking of success could look like.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gu.
Yeah, so, I mean, so far you said that there is no home ownership assistance that have been distributed, and there are 7 for rental. So for the employees who received that rental assistance, are they still living there, or what their housing situation is now?
Yeah, I know the program is for a year. They agree to live in a unit for a year, and then if they live for the year, then it's a grant. They don't need to pay back. We are aware of a couple employees who either left town employment and or left their unit, but I believe the remaining folks have stayed for that year.
Yeah, so that's 7. I mean, do you have a general idea of how many that currently still remains in their apartment, in their rental housing? We do not know.
That would be 5 of the 7 that we know that are still in their term that we're still tracking that would still be there.
Okay. Well, yeah, well, I mean, the number feels like it's pretty small number. Is there, in your conversation with employees, are there any other ways they feel will be helpful to them? If is there any other, ideas or thoughts, and say, is there any other ways that to be helpful?
There's a lot of ideas, I think, and it's hard to narrow it down to what really is doable, especially fiscally doable. Employees have asked for us to provide housing, have housing available, which I don't think is sustainable or cost effective. They also did ask us to do a monthly stipend. So we tried to do the best we could by making this recommendation to address that by allowing future rent payments to try to help them get in the apartment and get stable and figure out what their new budget is going to look like with some help through that first little bit. Those are some of the main ideas that came up. And then on the homeownership side, we were asked a lot to expand the area. We heard frequently. And so that's one of the primary recommendations that we brought forward tonight, to give out more opportunity for affordable housing stock so that people could take advantage of it.
The one additional thing I would add to that is the idea of the town renting units to employees, right? Kind of a master leasing arrangement is something that's been brought up, and the town is master leasing 5 units from the Union Chapel Hill, and we're planning on filling those units very soon. And our plan has been to use some of those units to lease to employees as well.
Okay. Well, thanks.
All right, if there's no more questions from council, we'll ask if there's anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item.
There is not.
Okay, back to council comments then, please. Mr. Nguyen says thumbs up. Anyone else?
I will then move R16.
Well, I'll just say thank you for working to try to find a better outcome. I mean, the goal is to get more employees able to live in Chapel Hill or close to be closer to work, I guess is the way we should say it. There are parts of Chapel Hill that are actually in Durham County. So we don't want to exclude by saying no Durham County. So I think there's ways to look at more naturally occurring affordable houses on the borders that make some kind of sense. And I think there's more opportunities that way with the program recommendations you're making. So it's been moved by Mr. Parker.
Second
by Ms. Anderson. We missed you here seconding all the time. All right, roll call vote then. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Boyncey.
Aye.
Ms. Gu.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
The mayor says aye as well. Thank you and that was a very wonderful detailed report. Thank you very much. We'll see you back again when we hear more.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us to our last item on the agenda. We have the concept plan review for 710 North Estes Drive.
And Justice. Good evening, I'm Judy Johnson with our Planning Department. I have a brief overview presentation on this concept plan at 710 North Estes, and then we'll turn it over to the applicant. So you can see the property, or the property in question is on the north side of Estes Drive. Coming up through the middle there is Somerset Drive. So it's adjacent to the Aura property, just to the east of that property, which I know you're all familiar with. So tonight we're looking for transmitting comments to the applicant regarding this concept plan. And just to remind you, concept plans, that no decision, it's a feedback only from council, looking for just some, just preliminary input to the applicant. Following concept plan, we go through, there's a possibility of 3 choices to go forward. Do anticipate that this project would come forward as a conditional zoning. We do encourage the applicant to discuss alternative, specifically if they wanted to pursue a development agreement with council. Very briefly, the lot is about a little over 7 acres. It's currently zoned residential 1. You can see Estes on the bottom of the property there, and Somerset just to the right of it. They are proposing rezoning the property to residential 5. It's approximately 78 townhome units. This project has been reviewed by our now 3 advisory boards that are looking at concept plans. It did go to the Community Design Commission and the Stormwater Management and Utility Advisory Board last night. So you got those comments, I believe, late this afternoon. So tried to summarize those comments just very briefly, and the concern about the northern buffer, the amount of green space, architectural details, and environmental aspects of the property from the Community Design Commission. And you all did just receive those full comments from the 3 boards. Housing Advisory Board looked at this 2 weeks ago or so, and interested in a variety of housing types and looking for the applicant to engage with the Community Home Trust. It did also go to the Stormwater Management Utility Advisory Board last night. I know they struggled with a little bit of, they needed and wanted additional information to be able to provide more robust comments. And in your packet is also Brian Peterson, our town urban designer's comment. He has met with the applicant and has made some suggestions to the applicant. And I'll let the applicant discuss how they, what they have taken from those comments. So, and as we've been trying to briefly give you a little bit of context of the property regarding our long-range planning efforts. So it is in the future land use map, which was adopted about a year ago now. It is in the future, or the South MLK Junior Boulevard focus area, sub-area B. You can see the star there right on, just north of the B there. Multifamily is identified as one of the primary land uses in this area, with heights up to 4 to 6 stories, but with a concern about transition on the north side of this property with respect to the single family neighborhood joining this property. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. If not, I know the applicant, Shay Casson, is here, and I know has
we'll go right to the applicant and save our questions, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Judy. Let me just set up my share screen here, and I'll jump right into a quick presentation. Okay, great. Can everyone see that home screen there and hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so my name is Shay Cashin. I'm a development manager with Lock 7 Development. Lock 7 is a boutique real estate development firm founded in 2007. We do specialize in multifamily buildings, mixed-use properties, and townhome communities. Primary markets of focus are the Mid-Atlantic, so the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, as well as North Carolina. Currently, we do have projects in most of those markets: DC, Maryland, Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte. The project team, Lock 7 Development, and then you may hear from Dave Gorman, who's one of our principals, who is on board tonight as well. CI Design, who's handling the architecture here. David Marcosi will be joining us to go through some of the design information and comments. And last is McAdams Engineering. So I think both Spencer and Jesse are on with us this evening and largely handling the engineering and stormwater management comments from earlier this week. So here's a brief project site description. Judy went through most of this, so I won't be long, but this is North Estes Drive and Somerset Drive. It's the vacant property between the future ore development and the Azalea Gardens retirement community. Our proposed land use is residential in the form of townhomes, and we are going from an R-1 to a proposed R-5 zoning code. So again, I have here the site plan, which Judy brought up as well, or sorry, I should say just an overhead, an aerial map. You can kind of get oriented here, and I'm happy to refer back to this if there are any questions, but North Estes and Somerset Drive is the north-south corridor here, and off to the left of the screen is MLK. The large cleared section to the left of this site is the future Aura, just so you can help to orient yourself. So just as an overview of the project here, what was submitted on our concept plan was 78 units, which is an approximate 12 dwelling units per acre. 10 building units, 10 dwelling units per acre, and 12 buildings ranging from 4 to 8 units in each. So each townhome is planned to have a garage with 2-car parking, and our unit mix is right now planned to be a mix of 3 and 4 bedroom units. So Judy alluded to some of this as well, but the Chapel Hill 2020 plan and the Central West Small Area Plan also call for multifamily residential of 3 to 4 stories in this location. So with that in mind, our plan provides a natural transition from the higher density mixed use Aura project next door down towards the single family detached homes along Estes and back Somerset Drive down towards the schools. So we did meet with the Affordable Housing Board last week. Some feedback of the constituents and board members, including potentially supporting more density on this site by doing maybe a 2/2 style condo townhome or a multifamily building at the front portion or along the Estes side of the project. And then continuing with that theme of a transition from the higher density along Estes and then moving maybe down in density or height as we move toward the rear of the site in the border with the Somerset Huntington Drive neighborhoods. So we did meet with Kimberly Sanchez and Lori Woolworth with Community Housing Trust after we met with the Affordable Housing Board, and we did receive some great feedback on the affordable housing needs of the overall community. So with that in mind, our intent is to continue to work with CHT and follow the local inclusionary zoning ordinance, but we don't have the specific unit mix or locations yet. Some of that is still pending just based on addressing other new comments from the boards this week. As far as stormwater management goes, we were able to clear up a few of the questions that were outstanding from last night. So our underground stormwater facility is proposed to be in the southwest corner of the site. There are some steep slopes on the site, but we do anticipate that will be under the 25% threshold. So we are not anticipating needing a modification for that. It's mostly on the perimeter of the site. The land disturbance is about 6 1/4 acres, and the impervious area proposed is 46%. There was a stream determination that was completed by the current landowner in 2021 that concluded that there are sections of a perennial or intermittent stream in the southwest corner, which I'll show on the concept plan. And while there is no associated Jordan watershed buffer, an RCD buffer could apply. So right now we're holding a 50-foot buffer from that stream on our plan, which is the same as what the Aura project did for the same stream next door. So here is our concept plan that we've submitted to the city. Just a few quick points. Primary access would be off of Somerset Drive, and we are proposing a connection to the Aura project on the west side of the site. We have not communicated with the developer over there yet, but we intend to do so to improve the connectivity of this part of the city. Typical unit sizes here are showing 22-foot and 20-foot widths so we can have a variety of sizes and price ranges as well. And then in the center of the site plan here, you can see the clubhouse and courtyard, and then also a common green continuing down kind of the center of the lower court, if you will, on the site plan there. I mentioned the stream in the southwest corner, so you can see that down here, and we are holding a buffer there. It's not as clear on this concept plan that's colorized, but we do have some measurements for that. As Judy mentioned, we did meet with Brian Peterson with the town of Chapel Hill. He provided some great feedback for us after we submitted our concept plan, but this is his sketch and a number of his comments, largely focused on improving the green space, which we definitely agree with and would be happy to do so. He also focused on connectivity, including the multimodal path at the front or along North Estes Drive, and potentially connecting our community sidewalks to that path. That's item number 6, as you can see down here in the corner. It's potential that we will have some retaining walls in that area, and that's also where the stormwater retention facility will be under that portion. So that remains to be seen, but definitely working with our consultants to include as many of Brian's suggestions as possible. So there, I'll just hand it over to David Mark Cozy from CI Design to walk through some of our design concepts on the next 3 slides.
Thanks, Jay. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. What you're looking at here is just a very early on concept elevation of how one of these typical rows would look. We have a mixture of materiality, all durable in nature. The base being of a darker brick and some accents of cementitious siding. And then above the base, we're looking at a standard red brick. The light blue / grayish color is continuation of a hardy siding. And then the darker gray, which are actually protrusions to the facade, would be that of another cementitious paneling system without the lap, so more flush with reveals. We are proposing some large windows in this project. We do want to get as much daylight as possible. And we will are investigating and looking to propose rooftop experiences for these towns. Shay, if you want to go to the next slide.
Yep.
So this is just giving you a little bit more of understanding of how we're looking to break down the buildings. We do not anticipate that these will be copycat rows. We will be creating some alternate combination of units so that there is more diversity around the site. And it was also one thing that we don't see on the slides, but we're taking very seriously, is how we address the sides and rears of the project of each row, where we do want to, and again, it was aligned with some of Brian Peterson's comments, that we do activate the sides of these rows and take advantage of some of the green spaces that the site has to offer. Give on our side. And so this is just the courtesy slide that we were kind of just still under the investigation of developing these concepts. And we just did some color studies. And as you can see, option number 1, the top left corner is kind of where we, the direction we are leaning more toward at this point. But again, these are really early on, and we welcome any kind of comments, and look forward to continuing the dialogue.
Thank you. Can you bring us back to full screen, please?
Yep, just stop sharing. Yep.
Okay, council clarifying questions, and we'll hear from the public and then come back to council comments. Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. One question is, what price point are you looking at for the units?
Shay, you're muted. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thank you for that. So that's one item that we're still trying to figure out as we confirm a unit mix and final number, kind of approved number. We are looking to provide missing middle housing for family units, which is the focus of the 3 and 4 bedrooms. With that being said, kind of some early pricing models had units starting in the 500s and going from there. So a wide variety, but certainly need to confirm the overall mix once we get a little bit further with the council and the community.
Thanks.
Okay, others? It's Ryan and Mr. Parker.
On the western part of your property, there's a Duke easement that we're hoping eventually becomes a greenway. Is that all on the Aura property? Do you share that with Aura? Do you know what the land ownership is there?
Say, I believe it straddles the property line. I think it's a 30-foot easement.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Parker?
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about the buffers, around the property, particularly, how wide your proposed buffers are and how they relate to what our code requirements are?
Yeah, sure. So
go ahead, Shay.
Shay, go
yeah,
ahead.
I think we have basically a number of different buffers depending on which side. I think there's a mix of 10 and 15-foot buffers, usually type B buffers. So based on that, we are considering the relations with the neighbors, and we've talked to community members and neighbors that do have concerns about that. But we are trying to work with them, work with arborists to figure out the right degree of trees and shrubs, and also would consider fencing in some of those areas as well.
But would those buffers be in accord with our current code requirements, or would you be looking for, variances or exceptions?
Yeah, Jesse, would you mind?
Yeah, this is Jessie Hardesty. I'm a planner with McAdams. And yes, the buffers that are shown on the plan right now are up to code with the two different land uses next to each other.
Great, thank you.
So we would not be asking for any modifications on this.
Any other clarifying questions before we hear from the public? Ms. Gu?
Yeah. Can you on your drawing, can you show us again where is the entrance and exit? How many entrance and exits are there for this project?
Yep. Should I share my screen again?
Yes, please.
Sure. So the primary entrance would be off of Somerset Drive. One of the comments we received from Brian Peterson in Urban Design was to try to have that aligning with the entrance across Somerset for Azalea Gardens Retirement Community. So that would be the primary access there. And then the second access point would be across the Aura project. It's close to the townhome portion of that project at the rear of their site. So just the two means of entrance and exit there.
So for that second entrance, does it need to go through the RCD or the creek in the middle? Yeah, on the one that next to Aura. Yeah.
Here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Jesse, would you be able to speak to that?
Yeah, so the RCD is actually at the southwestern corner of the site. So that connection would not be punching through the RCD.
Oh, okay. So if you needed this second access, do you need to have conversation with Aura for your traffic to go through their property?
So I think that those conversations still need to be had, but when Aura was designed, it was set up so that there would likely be a connection to this property there.
So you have not engaged any conversation with them, but if you need their property to have your traffic from your property to go through their property, I'm sure that you need to have some agreement with them. Is that right?
Yeah, I think
That's
those
right.
discussions. Oh, I'm sorry, Shay, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, so it is a requirement by fire code, and we have we don't have an official agreement, but we have discussed with one of the development managers over there at Trinsic. So a preliminary conversation has taken place. We just need to further vet the exact location and the connection and the like.
I see. Okay. And then to the front, you have this what your current drawing, the one that you're on your shared screen, there's no multimodal paths going through in front of your property?
That's right. So it is not shown on this concept plan, but we have every intent of working with the town to complete what we understand is kind of that missing link in the multimodal path. So you're correct, it's not shown in this preliminary drawing, but we do intend on including that as a part of our development project.
Okay, so well, let's assume there is this multimodal path going through the front of your property, but these townhomes, they are facing, I mean, the front of the townhome is facing inside, right? The one, I mean, the side facing the Estes Drive is the back of the townhomes.
Yeah, that's a great point. David, would you mind going through the rear load and the front load as we discussed last night?
Sure thing. So all of the rows that you're seeing that are along the perimeter are facing the perimeter of the property. So the rows along North Estes would front North Estes. Equally, the rows that are happening along Somerset would face Somerset. And then the 3 rows of towns along the shared property line with the Aura project would face the Aura project and those green spaces associated that are in front of those. Internally, each row that happens internally would be facing and fronting the green space. So that would entail that all of the rear of the townhouses would be rear loaded along the street edges shown.
Oh, so your internal streets will have, on both sides of the internal streets, they are like the back of your townhomes.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. I don't know what they will look like. You haven't shown any of those renderings for that, but I think from the street perspective, of course, it looks better if you have the townhomes fronting the street. But I don't know what kind of internal experience it's going to be there. All the internal streets are the back of the townhomes. So I don't know what that look like. Okay, then we go to the north. I think that's the north edge of your property. So you're saying that buffer, which is facing the single family houses, that is only 10 to 15 feet buffer?
That's right. Jesse, would you be able to help with this one?
Yeah.
Sure. So there is a 10-foot type B buffer, and that would be closest to our townhomes. And then adjacent to that, there's also 25 feet of an easement. And then I think the other 25 feet is opposite of the property line. So we'll have a buffer along the property, and then roughly from where our closest townhome is to the closest single family home, it's about 100 feet of separation.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that from the edge of your townhome to the edge of their single family property, there's about 100 feet.
From building to building, it's approximately about 100-foot separation. And then on our property, as far as buffers go, it would be a 10-foot buffer.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think these are the questions that I have now.
Okay, any other questions, Mr. Boynton?
Yep, just one question, but from what I recall, along Somerset Drive right now, along, was it I forget which side of the property, yeah, where your mouse is. Have you all contemplated, and maybe I'm missing it, but a sidewalk along that side?
Yes, so there actually is a sidewalk which currently exists all along Somerset from Estes back to Huntington.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Parker?
Yeah, just a very quick one. I know you've said the townhomes are, your plan is 3 or 4 bedrooms each. What does that translate to in the square footage of the townhomes?
David, you want to touch on that?
Yes, I will look that up real quick for you. It'll range between 2,700 to 3,000 square foot per tenant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so can I ask why, I mean, you mentioned there would be perhaps rooftop amenities. Is there a reason to do that versus on the ground yard space or deck space or something?
I can speak to that.
There's 4 flights up to get there, so that's interesting, and it can
Sure.
no more noise is one reason I'm asking as well.
So there's just an opportunity to utilize some of the overlooks, specifically to specifically the rows that happen along the edge of Laura. There will be some nice views that will overlook some of the green space there. And it's still, again, Madam Mayor, it is a concept, so we will be weighing out the reality behind those rooftops, but it is something that we're interested in pursuing at this point.
Okay. And your design is modern, which is fine. It's just that we've seen when townhomes are facing the street side, it's more of a stoop effect that makes it look more integrated with the community as far as housing. It was interesting seeing your front. It looked more almost commercial office front. So I didn't know what the thinking was with that.
The stoops are still young in design. There is some topography that would happen, and it would be a little bit of topography changed from row to row. So there will be a more pronounced stoop expression that would develop during the design of the rest of these towns. So yeah, we do want to take that seriously, and it is a good point that you bring that up.
Okay. And how far back would you be from the multimodal path on this concept is what is the thinking there?
That is also a good question. Shay, do you want to go back to the site plan right there? We haven't along the multi-use path along North Essex, we haven't dove into that specifically and how it aligns with our adjacent properties. So it's still under investigation, but there would be some small green space in front of the stoops before we would get to that multi-use path for sure. I could only guesstimate about 8 to 10 feet approximately.
Okay. All right. Well, I know we have members of the public wishing to share comments. We welcome your comments. We ask you to try to keep them within the 3-minute range. I didn't know the group was hoping to do a presentation, but I didn't hear from them. So we'll see how that shakes out. Mr. Parker, we'll call you in 2 at a time, and we welcome to hear from you. Thank you.
So we have first Brian Daniels, followed by Lillian Pierce.
Good evening. This is Brian Daniels. I am one of the neighbors that lives in the Somerset neighborhood. And there's several things I'd like to comment on as a neighbor. This supporting of the connection to the multimodal path is really important for this community. So I really am encouraged to see that. We think townhomes are the appropriate use of this residential property. So we're encouraged to see that as well. And given the number of comments and concerns we raised around traffic for the Aura property, connectivity onto Estes, and the need for there to be a stoplight at the Somerset intersection, given that that is a dangerous intersection today, seeing the connectivity across Aura, across this property onto Somerset, those are all things that we're very encouraged by. There are some factors that are unique to this site I wanted to bring to your attention. This site is not vacant. It is actually fully wooded. And if you walk on this property, there are multiple stands of native North Carolina trees, maple, oak, many of them older than all of us, 60, 70 years old. And so putting some effort into trying to maintain as much tree cover as is practical given the construction that needs to happen. Stands of trees that are 8 to 10 trees together that give some integration with the neighborhood. You know, Estes is a very treed corridor. As an example, if you look at the tennis courts at the middle school, there's a stand of probably 20-25 mature trees that front Estes. So there's ways to accomplish that and still have impervious space. So we would just ask the council really probe on the ability to maintain some of that tree cover. There was a lot of discussion around buffers. And I think there is some concern about a 3-story building with a 4th floor party deck over traditional two-story family homes at the back of the property, and the buffers that were discussed tonight just don't seem adequate. Frankly, if you were to look at Azalea Gardens, there's actually a 250-foot buffer from the parking lot to the utility easement on the back of that property. So I think that I'd really encourage the council to probe deeply on that topic in particular. I'd also ask that you look very carefully at the CDC comments. There was a very spirited conversation about the site, the aesthetics, and buffers. I would encourage you to listen closely to that advisory committee and the comments that they provided, because they were very thorough and very much in alignment with the concerns of those of us in the community. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Lillian Pierce, followed by Tobias Overath.
Mayor and Council, thank you so much for this chance to comment. I'm Lillian Pierce. I live in the Huntington, Somerset neighborhood. In fact, I'll be one of the closest neighbors to families who move into 710 North Estes. This lot is really beautiful. It's currently wooded and it slopes from the northeast to the southwest. I will welcome the new families, but I'm concerned about some aspects of the current concept, which masses these 4-story buildings so close to our homes. I want to talk about this easement Jesse mentioned. It's a gas easement, and the gas company thrashes vegetation to the ground periodically for safety. I know we all remember the tragedy in Durham, and we take gas safety very seriously, but I think we should acknowledge that's a gas easement. It's dirt. It can't be landscaped, and it doesn't help create that kind of beautiful transition between homes. Moving on from that gas easement, which I hope we can set aside. It's a utility line. It's not a buffer. I really appreciate the town is trying to get this concept right. I listened to the CDC meeting last night and I wrote down some quotes. I think they're verbatim. Let me just run through some of the words I heard at the CDC. Very concerned about the design, has nothing to do with this single family neighborhood. Site plan is fighting the site geometry. No attempt to be contextual at all. It's severe and has nothing to do with the site. Not thinking about what the land is about or the environment around it is all about. Dead-end road would put lights directly in backyards of longstanding homes. Create smaller units that mediate with a budding neighborhood. Opportunity to do great creative things. Opportunity on the northeast. Have much more green space to create better green space. And again, much more green space was said. So that's from the CDC meeting. Back to my own words. This is a really lovely part of Chapel Hill, and it's a friendly, mutually supportive neighborhood. I invite Lock 7 and council members and town staff to come and walk with us to see the transition to Huntington and Somerset and see how we could harmonize new dwellings, not just with us, but also with Azalea Estates. I hope for a plan that doesn't simply clear cut, but nestles townhouses into the trees and gives all 3 communities a chance to come together and just feel like one neighborhood. In particular, I hope to see mature woods preserved along the northeast face, on par with the woods that are already preserved between Azalea Estates and our homes. Those woods are about 100 feet wide, and I really mean woods, not a gas easement. I think if we get this right, we'll have an enhanced and diversified neighborhood that's unified and anchored around preserved trees, and that has new buildings that start small on the northeast and gradually gain in density as they head down the hill to Estes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tobias Overath, followed by Robert Beasley.
Welcome.
Hello, good evening. My name is Tobias Overath and I live in the Somerset neighborhood. I would like to thank both the mayor and the council members for your continued service to the town and for helping to keep and make Chapel Hill a town that we all like to live in. While I think the current concept plan could be much worse, it has some good things in it, I think it is equally fair to say that it could be so much better, that it could have so much more vision for what a new and exciting development on this site could be. A visionary project on this site could would include a variety of types of townhouses of varying sizes and shapes rather than the current monolithic cube-like townhouses that we've seen. A visionary project on this site would work with its terrain and topography. There's a nice gentle slope running northeast to southwest, which lends itself to variation in building heights from 1 or 2 story buildings at the top to 2 to 3 story buildings at the bottom. A visionary project would not only build a 3 to 4 bedroom $1 million townhouses that are supposedly geared towards families, but also provide reasons for families to want to live there. Currently, I don't see anything in this proposal for families, no park, no playground, etc. A visionary project would have identity and character. However, as far as I can see, there is currently no clear, distinctive feature about this proposal. And last but not least, a visionary project would not try to cram this many units on this site, but it would instead make a real effort to preserve as many of the mature trees as possible and to provide ample green space and buffers that would significantly increase the quality of life for people living on and near this development. In closing, I would strongly encourage the developer and their representatives to get in touch with all of the local neighbors so that we can work together to come up with a much improved and more exciting vision for this site. Thank you for considering these points.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Robert Beasley followed by Heather Lindemann.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Well,
thank you. So I really want to thank Councilmember Anderson for asking the question of the price, and I appreciate the response from the developer that you're trying to target the missing middle. But I don't think that a $500,000 starting price point is targeting the missing middle. We have got to start focusing on the housing segments that are not addressed in Chapel Hill. This average home sale price of $500,000 that we just looked at, with the challenges that the town is having in housing its own employees in housing that is affordable, has got to be addressed. I really want to encourage the council and staff to send a clear message to this developer that this is a real opportunity to get townhouses and affordable housing for a true missing middle, right? An 80 to 120% AMI. Yes, there can be some above that, and there should definitely be some below that. But a $500,000 price point, that is only going to exacerbate our housing problem and not address the needs of the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Heather Lindemann, and that appears to be the last person who wishes to speak with us this evening.
Hi, good evening, and thank you all very much. I want to reiterate several of the comments my neighbors have already made. I also live close by to this part of town, and I'd like to reiterate what a beautiful lot this is and how stunning the topography and trees are. And what this lot says to me is that this could be a really nice space for the members of our existing neighborhood, the Azalea Estates community, and the new neighbors to enjoy a wooded and tree canopy rich environment where those who love these things about Chapel Hill could move to Chapel Hill, enjoy the beauty of our natural environment as opposed to raising these trees and starting from scratch. When I see the images this evening, I see P Street in DC across from Whole Foods. It looks kind of like I'm walking down P Street. I just went to Whole Foods and picked up my dinner. And that's a really great part of town to live, but it's also a very different urban space with proximity to a lot more common spaces, parks, urban amenities than this particular location. If this is a place where families are going to live, and wow, those are really big townhomes, 2,700 to 3,000 feet is the size of many of the single family homes in the adjacent neighborhood. If families were to be enticed to move there, I would assume that there would have to be significantly more common space, integration with the forest and the trees, and opportunities to take advantage of what makes Chapel Hill so beautiful, which is to say our wooded areas and outdoor spaces that are not just going to a rooftop like party area. And so I suppose I would just like to say that I hope that townhomes can be built here, but I also hope that they might be more integrated into the existing environment, and that the trees might be a priority and a big part of what the developer takes into account, as opposed to something to be dismissed in order to build these large monolithic structures. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
That's it.
Okay, bringing it back to council for comments, Ms. Anderson and Ms. Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. There are a lot of things I think that we could nibble around the edges in terms of trying to get the placemaking right or get the urban design to be better. I certainly agree with the calls for it to be greener, but I think really what I'd like to focus on is just generally that I do think this will be a really nice transition between Aura and the single family neighborhoods. And I really do hope that you all come back to us, but I really would like to see something much different. That I think these are a housing type that I guess we could call missing middle, but they're not middle income. And I think that's what we've been asking for. That's what we have been hoping for in some other places. And we haven't been clear from the beginning that we're really worried about the price point and not just the housing type. So I'd really like to encourage you all to think about much smaller units that could be much more accessible. I'm going to go ahead and say that I really like the home ownership model. I do think that's really important. And part of the reason that's really important is not because we don't want other housing types, but because this is in the context of Aura, which we just approved, which is very heavy on rental. And so it's really appropriate for this to kind of be the companion to Aura in a lot of ways. One of them being that I think that home ownership is very appropriate here, but I do think it needs to be much smaller and at a much lower price point, because that's what we do desperately need. I think other things to think about once hopefully we can get that concept into a different place is that connectivity, thinking about connectivity to the multimodal path to the schools and to Aura. Thinking about some better amenity space. I think Aura will be definitely well used by these neighbors, rightfully so, but I would like to see maybe some pocket parks or some things thoughtfully placed in the community so that folks have places to go. And also connection to the schools, which are right around the corner. So thinking through how do you get from here to there to places that people are going to want to go. So I really like parts of your concept, but I do think that it just needs to be rethought in terms of the size and the cost of the units. And I think I really appreciate our urban designer taking a look and thinking through, because the urban design and the placemaking, I think, and our CDC, their comments are also helpful. But so I guess I really do hope y'all come back to us. I want to see this site have that housing that we need in between these two neighborhoods, but I'm just hoping it can be a much different concept. So thanks.
Ms. Ryan, followed by Mr. Parker.
Yeah, so I will heartily agree with what Ms. Anderson just said and not repeat that. We're really looking for a different product, I think. But I like the home ownership model. I like the townhome idea. I think that's on the right track. The design you come back with will need a much stronger placemaking focus. This is the you know, the streets are just a sea of garage, and then there really isn't much space in the back with backyards and things. I've seen some really successful townhome communities that kind of cluster the units around small backyards, or 6 or 8 or 10 units are kind of sharing a backyard. So the amount of space that is donated by each individual unit is small, but together it makes a nice play space for kids, or, you know, so think about doing more of that. So, and I think her point is well taken. I don't want to nibble around the edges of this. If you can come back with a product that's more like that, a couple of things I would think about. I think that we do need to rethink the 10-foot buffer at the neighbor's line. The gas easement isn't a buffer. I know they've talked about 100 feet. I think that's too much for a townhome versus a single family house neighborhood, but I think we need to do better than just the 10 feet. Very much want to see that connection between Aura running through this property over to Somerset. And I think for me, I think any project that came that did not have that, that would be a deal breaker. We need that for a lot of connectivity reasons. And let's see, and again, if there's we're going to, on that west side where that easement is, we really hope that will be a greenway. I know that when the Aura project came through, they recognized that as a potential greenway. And so I think this development needs to do that too. I've never seen a greenway that actually has house fronts facing on it. So that would need a rethink also. In terms of the architecture, I won't get much into that, except just it was very flat fronted. We need to see a lot more articulation if you go with that kind of architecture. And I don't think that the rooftop amenities are a substitute for yard or patio or garden space. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. Parker, then Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to repeat everything that Ms. Anderson and Ms. Ryan said. I agree with much of it. A couple of points. I mean, these are big townhomes, and obviously when they're that big, they're going to be pricey. And if you can deliver a 3,000 square foot townhome for less than $700,000, bless you. So I think what we need to see is at least a mix of different kinds of townhomes. I mean, this is basically, you've got two different sizes, and it's really just feels very monolithic and kind of cookie cutter. So if you could do things like at the northern edge, closer to the neighbors, maybe have some 2-story townhomes that are smaller and have a lower price point, and, you know, then build up the height, or then, you know, as you get toward the middle and maybe even toward Estes. But think about a broader range of townhomes, both in terms of the size of the homes themselves, the heights, a variety. So it starts to look like an actual neighborhood rather than, you know, townhomes that kind of got spit out. I think there needs to be more green space there. You know, I think Mr. Daniels mentioned something about a playground. Clearly, if you're trying to attract 70 odd families there, you really do need a place where if you want to attract kids, then you need a place for the kids to play, something to do. I mean, we have a serious deficit of those kinds of developments. And I would really hope that if your target market is families, then you're looking at putting some kind of family-oriented amenities there. I think also, I mean, I can understand the attraction of 2-car garages for townhomes that are that large, but I would urge you to think about perhaps going downtown with townhomes that are smaller and having 1-car garage. One of the complaints we heard when we did the Aura was that it was 2-car oriented, and now we're going to get townhomes that are, you know, half car. So I think we really need to start thinking about ways we get cars out of these things. And one way to do that is clearly by having smaller units. And personally, again, I can't speak for anybody else, but I would certainly be willing to look at a plan that had more units, but smaller and more attractively priced units, and some of the larger units as well, so that you're actually also creating a neighborhood with a mix of economic types. So different people will live there. It's not going to, if everybody there can afford to buy a 3,000 square foot townhome, that tells you a lot about what the economic profile of that community is going to be. So if we have some townhomes that are 1,000 or 1,200 square feet and priced accordingly, it's going to give us an economic diversity in this town, in this community, that I think would really be very valuable. So take it for what it's worth, but I think there's a lot you could do here. Like I say, by creating both economic and architectural diversity, and still come up with something that I think works for both you and the community. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Nguyen, then Ms. Gu, then Mr. Boynsey.
I agree with much of what's been said, so I won't repeat it. Definitely want to emphasize the smaller units, lower price points, all that good stuff. I'll add, I'd love to see some more amenities. I know, the plan is to share a lot of the amenities with Aura, but having some more complementary amenities on this site would be great. I definitely also agree with the 1 car per unit. I think the mix is good. But yeah, pretty much everyone said everything I had down. So yeah, just agree.
Ms. Gu, then Mr. Boynsey.
Yeah, well, I think that, my colleagues have covered a lot of the issues and I really agree. So I'm just trying to emphasize a few things. One is this multimodal path in front of the property. I think I think it's necessary to include that. It's going to be a deal breaker for me if I'm not seeing that multimodal path connection from Aura to the rest of the multimodal paths. I think that's the missing link. We just have to have that. That's very important to me. So if other connectivities that you can add into it, including the Greenway connection, I think that would be awesome. But this multimodal path in front of the property, I think it's a must. And then there is, I think you have heard from everyone about we need a variety of housing types in this project. I think the one that you show really is too monolithic, the way that both the way they look and the size. I don't know if it's your first draft or that's really is your plan, but I do not think that that kind of community is interesting or is the one that we want to promote in the town of Chapel Hill. We have been talking about the diverse housing, the one that you proposed from 2,700 to 300 for just townhomes. I agree that you probably cannot make that 500. You're probably going to go 700 or 750. We need different variety of both the size and the entry point. I think that will be the goal for our town, to provide that community, that of a housing type in the more like a neighborhood. So talking about the neighborhood, of course, we would like to see more of the green spaces and the buffer. I think the neighbors all have mentioned the need to provide that transition from your project to the single family homes in the north. I think it's important to provide that transition in the buffer so that all the different projects can in harmony. And I think that is a concept that we always try to promote. So I think the project by itself, it just currently just look too monolithic. And I definitely agree with my colleagues that want to see more varieties and to see that projects will incorporate the character and the features, including the existing trees on the site. So make it more interesting instead of the ones that you just clear cut everything and then put almost looking exactly the same, kind of like townhomes. Just multiply by 78 of them. I think that's not the vision that we're going to promote for our future development.
Mr. Boynsey?
I'll be quick. Like the connectivity to the Oro site and as well as along Estes Drive with the multi-use path. And definitely agree with my colleagues about having more varied townhomes of sizes. Certainly price points, we are always wanting affordable housing, true affordable housing. So we're really hoping that you can come up with something that presents different options for folks. Certainly options that are lower, much lower than $500,000. Also heartily agree that there needs to be some intentional creation of green space and common space that takes advantage of the currently existing landscape. And I agree with everything else that my colleagues have said. Thanks.
All right, I'll finish this up here. I won't repeat a lot of the comments that I also agree with. I do think you have an opportunity here because of the slope, because of the transition, that you could make more use of the western side of the property that is overlooking the greenway and the wooded area of the ARA project or the RCD part there. You could do more, but then slope back down towards the neighborhood and create that transition. And I agree, you need a mix of different ones. It's just very, I don't know, it's blockish looking. I don't find the appeal that I'd want to spend $700,000 to live there without more green space, more amenity, more understanding, and walk to the area with the neighbors. And you really do have to look at that gas easement. It's completely cleared. I mean, so if you cut down to a 10-foot buffer, that's nothing next to the neighbors and transition. And there are some beautiful hardwood trees there that could be saved and made part of the amenity space for this project. The neighbors also brought up about not having people park on the street because of site issues on there. So I hope they'll bring that forward for recommending. So I do worry about coming back down for everyone having a 1-car garage. So a lot of people like to have the extra bay for bicycles and all those other things. So I think a mix of things would be better, and to provide enough parking. For now, I'm hoping we transition from needing parking, but so people aren't forced to park out in the street or having visitors over, those kinds of things. We worked with the Bridgepoint project for them to share some of that backyard space like Ms. Ryan was talking about. I think that's going to look really neat, and it affords more community gathering spaces as well. So I think you have some work to do here, but I think it's townhouses is what we're trying to see, but we also want to see that middle price point as well, and mixtures of housing together, not all the same exact cookie cutter look. So those are our comments. Are there questions that we didn't answer for you or things you want to ask us back? Okay, council, you ready to transmit the comments then?
I move R17.
Second.
The move by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Nguyen to transmit our comments. Roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Boincy.
Aye.
Ms. Gu. Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. That is all we have on our agenda this evening. Wish everyone a good evening, and see you soon. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Bye.
Right.
Night, everybody.